open it up for visitor comments. Anybody online? Okay, we'll go to our first item on the agenda, which is water system master plan update. Finn Buster with Keller Associates. Come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Good to be here. Good weather. Awesome. So, we've been here before for the stormwater and wastewater master plans, and we're glad to be back at this point to present kind of a summary presentation on the water master plan and the results. I'm Peter Olson. I was project manager with Keller Associates.
I'm Trenton Buster as project engineer.
We'll go ahead and dive right in.
Yeah.
Start going through it. So next slide. I'm not sure which one he is controlling.
Just a minute.
All right. So for the need and purpose, very similar to your stormwater, wastewater master plans, we're trying to establish what are the planning criteria, what is the demands on the system, what your condition of your facilities, current existing facilities in. We created and developed a hydraulic computer model, and then ran that model both with the existing conditions as well as projected increased loads or increased demand, loads as wastewater. And then recommended improvements to address any observed deficiencies. And that it comes out with the capital improvement plan and documentation in this overall report. We also, as a part of this, did the water management conservation plan update, which is kind of an accounting of what water rights, your source capacity, and then also what would happen if dropping your source capacity or anything hindering that with your curtailment, and how to manage that situation. And so we'll summarize that at the end. Next one. So starting off, we looked at population projections and growth, and we intentionally used the similar figure, similar distribution of what that growth. This is a crystal ball, right? Looking at where that growth may occur. We use the same one as the both the storm and wastewater plan to be consistent. So it has the same population projections, estimate of where it would occur. Next one. So we looked at the water usage, what users there are, how much they're using, and that pie chart shows kind of the general distribution of what that usage is. And then the chart there on the bottom right just shows months a month throughout the year. We have 5 different years shown of kind of what that usage looks like, and it's pretty standard with the summer high demand and winter lower demand. Next one. Looking at so we look at the whole year, and then looking at the daily, you can see kind of what that typical usage looks like with that unit curve. So it shows that early morning time period as your peak usage. That makes a lot of sense with irrigation and things like that. That happens throughout the night to be more efficient. Then we looked at what the average day, max day, peak hour, what are those levels of usage that we're going to want to plug into the water model to test it and see how the system operates. And then we compared those with also peaking factors with your average day demand to how much the peak is, and compared those with other communities to make sure things, do that sanity check and make sure that St. Helens isn't off the chart somewhere, not within the acceptable ranges. Next one. We looked at your unaccounted for water. Unaccounted for water is what's not metered, what's not being consumed through the individual user meters or through construction meters, so on and so forth. The target is typically 10% or less by the American Water Works Association, sets a general standard for that. And what we see with your system is it's averaged out there from year to year to 18.5%. There's improvement to be made. It's not the worst we've seen, but there's improvement that can be made there. And that comes from different sources that aren't metered, like hydrant flushing, the construction water that may not be metered. I think the city does a pretty good job of that, I believe. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus on that one. But, and then just the unknown system leakage. Every system has leakage, and you try and minimize that best you can and stay on top of it. Next one, projected water demands. We looked at projecting those residential, commercial, industrial, and wholesale from 2021, which is our start of the plan period through the 20-year planning period. And those values get plugged into the hydraulic computer model, and that's the system. Next one is regulatory criteria. This helps us to also know what we're going to evaluate the system on for storage. You have operational, peaking, fire, and standby emergency storage. So we make sure that the city has enough storage, or we evaluate it to see it has all those components in storage. You look at one tank, it's one volume, but then you want to make sure that you have enough to cover those different components. Fire flows, we depict what the expected or required fire flows are from the fire department for residential, commercial, and as you would expect, the industrial has the highest demand, 4-hour flow at 3,500 gallons a minute. So that plugs into that fire protection component of the storage. Distribution pressures, we're establishing the a minimum pressure of 40, maximum operating pressure of 80, and that just lets us know that water model, when it's higher or lower, that's when we raise the flag, and how do we want to address that. Next slide. Water filtration facility evaluation. So looked at that, and as you would expect, pretty new facility. It's in good condition. There's just going to be normal upgrades, and then also membrane filter replacements. These are fixed assets that need to be replaced. They have a defined lifespan, and those membranes are either at that lifespan or will shortly be meeting that. And they don't just stop working one day all of a sudden. So it's a planned time frame that you want to replace those membrane filter. And then also looking at the chemical pumps again. They have a certain lifespan. They don't last as the 40-year lifespan of what you would expect for a treatment plant, and they just need replacement from time to time. So nothing out of the ordinary, I would say, about the filtration in good condition.
So the next thing we were looking at is the supply and delivery analysis. So this is just looking at each of the pumping facilities throughout the water system and comparing it to the demands that it needs to supply. So the first one is the supply. So this is based on your water rights compared to the demands, and there's a surplus by 2041, indicating there's no need for additional water rights within the planning period. Then we looked at the water filtration facility pumping capacity, and it's a similar story. There's a surplus by 2041, so no need to install bigger pumps or increase treatment capacity. We looked at the Lamont booster station, which provides water to the high pressure zone. So it's a smaller zone than the whole system. Similar story, it had a surplus and no need for bigger pumps. And then the same with the Elk Ridge pressure zone, which is a small development. It has a surplus by 2041. So the summary of this is no need for bigger pumps setting the pumping facilities. Slide. Similarly, we looked at the storage analysis. So this is actually breaking out into each of the components that Peter mentioned. Once we get down to the bottom, so we looked at 2 scenarios for the existing water demand, one with the 2 million gallon reservoir online and one with it offline as it is existing right now. And if it is offline, there is a storage deficit of approximately 700,000 gallons. If it's online, there's a surplus. So the improvements with that is showing that the 2 million gallon reservoir needs to be repaired to get a surplus in the storage. And then once we projected the demands out to 2040, even with the 2 million gallon reservoir online, there was a deficit that's going to take place due to the increased water demands. So that indicates there's going to be a need for future storage reservoir that needs to be installed. Next slide. So as Peter mentioned, we developed a hydraulic model. We updated all the pipes and the pumps and the storage reservoirs. We completed fire hydrant testing. This was to get real world data points to compare with the hydraulic model so that we know that it's putting out outputs that are representative of the real water system. We allocated the water demands by residential, commercial, industrial, and then we input the control settings that were reported for each of the pumping facilities and storage reservoirs. Right. So the next thing we did was we exercised this hydraulic model and we looked at the average daily demand. And we looked at this to identify high pressures because the system's not under high demands in this scenario, so the pressures are going to be higher than during the peak hour, which is the second scenario we looked at, which was used to look at low pressures, trying to find areas below 40 psi. And then the last one was the maximum day demand plus fire flow. This is the highest demand that a water system is likely to see. It's a maximum day, so in the summer, and then there's a fire flow event that happens. Next slide. So here's the results from the existing average day demand. All the dots in blue indicate pressures that are over 80 psi. So as you can see, there's quite a few down on the east side of town toward the river. And then also in the high pressure zone toward the west, there's pressures over 80 psi. Next slide. Under peak hour demand conditions, so we're looking for pressures below 40 psi. There's only a couple areas, one along Helen's Way and Oakwood Drive in the main pressure zone, and then also north of Pittsburgh Road in the high pressure zone. We're looking at the maximum day demand plus fire flow. So what we're looking at here is just the red dots where the available fire flow does not meet the specified demand for the zoning type. The green is residential, red is commercial, and purple is industrial. So there's numerous areas throughout the system that don't have the available fire flow to meet the fire flow demands. And so we looked at improvement projects to increase that and get those up to what the fire flow demands are. Slide. And then this was looking at the future water system demands under maximum day plus fire flow. So we were looking at the areas where there was indicated to be growth and if there would need to be system improvements in order for those developments to be able to meet the available fire flow. So there's numerous of the growth areas which will be needing improvements in order to meet that. So now that we've looked at all the looked at the deficiencies in the system, we started evaluating alternatives. And we looked at numerous. The one we want to highlight in this presentation is the storage alternatives that we looked at. So this first table here is looking to address the existing storage deficit. So alternative one would be repair the existing reservoir and then constructing a future reservoir to meet the future storage needs. And the second alternative would be to demolish and replace the 2 million gallon reservoir in place and then install again a future reservoir, but it wouldn't need to be as big as alternative. So our recommendation would be to repair the existing 2 million gallon reservoir and then constructing a future larger storage reservoir in the future. This brings us to the next slide, which is selecting a location for that 4 million gallon reservoir. So it needs to be at the same elevation as the existing reservoirs in order to provide the same operating pressures. So that kind of limits the areas that we could put it at. Site one would be at the same site because it's the same elevation. Then if you follow that elevation down, there's 3 more potential locations south of Pittsburgh Road. Our recommendation would be to go with alternative 4 in orange. It's got the best, the topography at that site is likely going to result in less earthwork, and it's a large area. And then the transmission pipeline will mainly be in the Sykes Road right away, not going through private property here.
And this also doesn't reflect some of the other locations throughout the city. There's obviously other locations throughout the city that we looked at, but when you're looking at the size of a 4 million gallon reservoir and what you need to have for better constructability, that kind of starts guiding those sites. And this is a high level review and look at these items. So.
So was that Asbury's Acres, the pipe work?
On Sykes.
I don't know the name of it. Do you,
On the right side.
I don't know the name of it specifically, so.
Farmer's Field.
I don't think it's a farmer's field. It's a forested area. So, I'm correct.
Is that Kathy? There's more than me.
Right.
Okay.
It's not-
Yeah.
Is it the one, is it the one you're thinking of?
The arbor development, okay. You wouldn't go up higher expecting future growth?
We have to follow that band of the contours. If we go up higher, then you have different operating pressures and you basically create a whole new pressure zone. So you can put more storage in the higher zone in the future, but our analysis showed that the higher pressure zone doesn't need it. So you have the higher zone there that could, feed the future
Will
system.
need it, right?
Yeah,
For the demand, like fire or whatever.
correct.
So also as a part of this master plan was a high level review of the operations and maintenance activities of the water system. So these are outlined here at the filtration facility. There's no recommendations. The O&M activities there are good. With reporting, we're recommending completing an annual water audit to continue to calculate that unaccounted for water. Continue with the current flushing program, developing a valve exercising and replacement program, inspection of the water storage reservoirs, the interior and exterior, continuing with the water line replacement and meter replacement. Also developing a leak detection program to identify those pipelines that have leaks and getting those replaced. And lastly, continuing to develop public education about the water system and the operation.
A leak detection program, when you put flow meters in certain areas of the city to try to see.
So for
Yeah,
wastewater, yes. So it's a different style, different system. That's a good question. Is the meters, you can watch and look at your, Lamont booster station and your reservoirs and know kind of the flows coming in and out in general. But this one, you do leak detection usually through sonic, and you go listen,
Okay.
listen throughout the system.
I'm familiar with that.
And so it's pretty effective way of tracking that, or it's just visible. There's a spring where there shouldn't be a spring, things like that.
That's typically how we find them around here.
And if you have your billing system is sophisticated enough, you can also, as it's tracking, it'll have built-in program alarms and red flags that it'll send out. If some user all of a sudden has 3 times the usage that month, that user has no idea that there might be a leak on, downstream on their side of their connection.
Yeah.
And so that there's certain ways to,
We actually have a picture.
I was just gonna say, we were just talking about it.
so as a water engineer, I drive around sometimes, I'm like, oh, there's got to be a leak there,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be that
Intuition.
annoying person that's gonna go tell that.
And that's been on the salt, the vibration, the pipes have vibration now.
Yep.
Doesn't make it a good thing.
No, that vibration is what helps with the identify where the leaks are. They can listen to a hydrant or a meter over here, and they can, triangulate and deduce where that leak is approximately. And then you start digging and find it. We've seen success in a number of different systems that way. And, really good operators, a lot of times they don't even need that.
The old boys just use witching sticks.
That's all. We can have a long discussion about that. But on that note, they know where the leaks are typically, and the reason is because of the replacement program. So that goes into our next slide. So the replacement program here, it's important. It's a big number, right? You have a big system. If you don't regularly replace these pipe, and so you guys obviously would prioritize the older pipe, steel lines, things like that are going to be susceptible to leaking, and identify those. But we tried to identify here with distribution pumps, the meters, the meter registers, even breaking those down, distribution piping, booster pump stations themselves and the reservoirs. And what would it take, the typical useful lives, that total amount, what would that be? This is not a financial consultant. Steve can, break down things a lot better than that and how to plan for those things in the future. But this just gives you a real ballpark item of that's what it would take on an annual basis, stowing that away and spending it on replacement.
So we also looked at the existing staffing levels for the water system. So it was reported there's about one full-time employee at the filtration facility and about 3.5 full-time employees at the distribution system. And based on our typical operations and maintenance durations, and that looks within our calculated range, one at the water filtration facility and 3.25 to 3.5 in distribution. But this is assuming they spend all their time on those specified O&M activities, not being pulled aside for other building maintenance or event setup and stuff like that.
It was actually very similar to the storm and wastewater, if you remember those, the similar results and kind of what we saw there is that they're being pulled away on other assignments. If they weren't doing that, we would have a good FTE.
So the rest of the council knows that they have to run around to certain areas in our city and pull samples of water and get tested at random. So you'll see them out, like you said, 2 or 3 of them out doing that because they're getting ready to send a bunch of tests in. So, but they are not full time.
It's a lot of work as an operator.
Quite frequently on other things.
One capital improvement plan. So taking all this information and what does that capital improvement plan look like? And we broke it down into 5 different priorities. And we don't always do this, but with water systems, with recent requirements, they have you look at a kind of a seismic resiliency aspect, and that requires us to look out to 50 years instead of just the 20-year time frame. And then we have the priority 4, where it's more development driven. It's kind of that crystal ball that we want to note it. There's a project that needs to be done if there's going to be development out here, but it's going to be driven by developers, and it's not needed for existing deficiencies and so on. Next slide. So they want us to break it down, and the first chunk is ironically, instead of a 5, a 6-year CIP. And so this is that priority 1, what we would tackle there. So, and that should look familiar in that the repairing the existing 2 million gallon reservoir. We acknowledge the fact that there's a whole nother, discussions and things happening. We don't need to get into that with this, and we Sharon and them did that on purpose to kind of have a separate analysis and results coming out of that. The next one. This is, I don't expect you to read this. So, this is a large table of all the projects. And it shows also future water master plans, future water management conservation plans. Those are all, and what's important there is those types of projects are eligible for SDCs. So documenting that here kind of helps, potentially fund those projects in the future with those SDC funds. Those are decisions not to be made by us. We just allocate, what its eligibility for SDC funds are. Next one.
This brings us into the water management and conservation plan, WMCP. That was also part of this master planning effort. So a lot of these items in the WMCP that are required get covered in previous sections of the water master plan. So the sections that weren't covered is looking at 5-year conservation benchmarks. So these are outlined pretty specifically in Oregon's regulations, and just have the table of all the benchmarks, the date, and then the frequency for each of them to be completed. So you see the annual water audit for calculating unaccounted for water. The water system's fully metered already, so no benchmark for that. And then leak detections in there. So just a 5-year plan on conservation efforts. Next slide. And then the last part of the WMCP is updating the water curtailment plan. So in the event of a supply shortage, what are the different triggers and what are the different stages? So it's largely based on the previous curtailment plan and the last master plan with a couple changes. We broke it into 4 different stages. There's mild, moderate, critical, and emergency. So with mild here, it's the trigger is that a water shortage may exist, target to reduce water usage by 5%. And this is done by voluntary irrigation, informing the public, and then limiting hydrant flushing. The next stage would be moderate, and this is if a water shortage surely exists, try and reduce water usage by 10%, and continuing to enforce or recommend voluntary irrigation limitations, continuing to inform the public, continuing to limit flushing, sidewalk washing, and then also restricting vehicle washing. The next stage would be critical. So this is if there's a threat to the water supply and need to reduce water usage by 25%. So limiting swimming pool usage, hydrant flushing for emergency use only, and then restricting city park irrigation. And the last, in the event of an emergency, if there is significant restrictions to the water supply, reduce it by 50%, and then prohibiting all irrigation usage, restricting industrial water usage, and then also activating backup water sources such as the Bayport well. That brings us to the end of our presentation. So we'll open it up for any other questions or.
I have a list.
Sorry. Go ahead, Doug. Doug actually raised his hand first.
Okay, I have a, if you check out our mission statement, our second item on our mission statement, either on either wall here suggests the word safe. Safety to me is the utmost importance. That's why I'm here. It's one of the guiding forces that told me to run for, or encouraged me to run for this position. We have in our city a catastrophic fire zone, whether you know it or not. It's a state fire marshal's outline, and that area is to the north. It's the Dalton Lake area, and it's full of dry brush in the summertime, and it's noted as one of the state's highest catastrophic fire zones. I followed that up years ago to find out, and it's verified here, that the reason that the fire departments won't go that direction is because they don't have enough pressure in the fire hydrants. The second reason that the fire department here was that if they took a fire engine down into that area, there was they would feel that it could get trapped. I kind of agree with that, but the zoning for residentials had a 80-foot turnaround in each person's yard for a fire engine to turn around. Now this is where the zoning, planning, and the kind of the infrastructure of dealing with the fire department and what happens if a fire gets started in that area. And in the summertime, with the north winds blowing 10 to 20 almost every afternoon, you know that if a fire got started there, the north end of the town would be wiped out. Much like we see on television this last summer, almost every night on the news down in California. The condition exists in that area. Now, today, I'm finding out that the same condition exists, that we haven't gone forward, moved forward to get the pressure up in that system down on Great Cliff area, down on Belton Drive area, in that area, which is just south of the area that I'm talking about. So I just have to bring that up, that it's it's an unsafe place to live in terms of fire. And two, what can happen with the winds that sweep this direction and up towards Pittsburgh Road, where there is a massive amount of residential, that we're kind of sitting on a time bomb if we don't do something about this. I appreciate your report. I appreciate what you're doing. What I'm discouraged about is that in the report, and it's out of your scope, I do believe that safety in terms of fire prevention is not somewhere a priority in terms of pressure and identifying areas that are of high population and vulnerable to fire. So that to me is as important as the water we drink, and the places we live are extremely vulnerable to fire. So I just thought I'd bring that up. And I don't know if that's been brought up in your other presentations in other cities or not, but this one is, it's a time bomb. I mean, it's like if we have another summer like we did last summer and that dry and that vulnerable, I think without me saying something at this point, I would feel very guilty about not revealing those circumstances that I know of. I don't expect an answer. It's just an input to you folks.
Yeah, the fire flow demands are what drive most of the needs and deficiencies in a water system. So in that way, it is addressed. And you know, the storage requirements, the pipe sizes, the capital improvement plan does address that. We don't go to the level that you're talking about of going in and saying this is a higher risk than another area for fire. Yeah, definitely out of my expertise. I'm not a fire you know, those types of things would be handled by them. So I appreciate your comment. I mean, it's important, and that's one main reason why the water master plans are required, is because those fire flows are what drives most of the improvements in the system.
Well, it's up to us to read between the lines, and I appreciate that.
So yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna follow up a bit on Doug. I've got a longer list. When you describe fire danger, are you talking about 1, 2, 3, or 4 residences that you have to fight? Or is your model only based on one dwelling?
One event. We're talking about an event where in a residential neighborhood, those fire flows that we depict as the criteria is what the fire department has communicated with us that they would like to see.
Because now with people having mobile homes next to their main residence, the next question having to do with residential, if I bring in 5 fire trucks and hook up to 5 different hydrants, do I get 5 levels of flow, or am I still limited by the main line?
Yeah, I don't know many systems that are going to be able to handle 5 fire trucks pulling out 1,500 gallons.
That was okay.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Similarly, as you look at this, when we go to the industrial area, we assume we're going to have a fair number of businesses down there, and some of them maybe, let's call them highly flammable. What was the level of firefighting the levels here seem like awful low flow?
3,500 gallons a minute for a 4-hour event.
Yep.
And that is actually pretty high.
I know it's pretty high.
And that we work with the fire, like I mentioned, we work with the fire department. If they tell us we need a 5,000 gallon minute, there's a location that needs that. They're the ones that analyze that and tell us what is required there. And
Okay, so that was the question, is how do we determine that? And obviously, if you have a whole lot of flammable type manufacturing, somebody's got to tell you what the flow is needed.
fire department, fire marshal, that's their job. They're the experts.
Okay, I'm trying to find out who is doing this business. Okay, now you also use the term membrane in your filtration. I have a number of different discussions of, is this a particulate membrane or a soluble membrane?
My goodness, that's a question I would have to ask our process engineers. It's Paul membrane. I believe it's Paul, if it's correct. So it's a manufacturer that they make.
Is it reverse osmosis or just the high-grade membrane?
I don't believe it's reverse osmosis.
So it's particulate membrane. And
Fair
the,
enough.
okay, the situation that I'm thinking of, if somebody dumps a caustic load of soluble material in the river, how can our system handle that? Because the sand isn't gonna stop it and the particulate membrane isn't gonna stop it.
We did not.
You did not look
We
at
did
it.
not analyze that specific
Okay.
situation.
Next question, you put chemistry like chlorine and stuff in at the pumping areas. Do you analyze the level of that chemistry when it gets to the front of a residence?
We did not do a chlorine dissipation analysis in this one. We work with the operators who do the testing regularly of the system and know what that chlorine, what's the term? Residual, a complicated word. Chlorine residual is throughout the system. They're constantly testing that and monitoring that. We talk with the operators and see where there's any concerns, issues. Typically, we will know that if there is an issue, it may be in the storage reservoir, it may be in the system. The model that has been developed as a part of our scope can be used to further analyze those types of things.
Because obviously, the pipes in this area are all not the same age. In fact, some of this town started off with wooden pipes, which now and then we find.
Can I interrupt there a second?
Sure.
Yeah, just with that idea of chlorine, in this system, is the chlorine settle to the lowest point? If it's not continually moving, will it settle into a residence or to a commercial outlet to the lowest point and stay there if it isn't, if that water's not being flushed and used regularly?
That's an interesting question. I've never talked with someone specifically about that. It's not something that settles out of the water. It's dissolved. And so what it does is dissipate. And so it doesn't have any more, effect. It gets used up by the whatever nutrients or whatever's in the water. So it would dissipate and then it would have a certain age and then it's no longer there. The chlorine is no longer active.
It would have a smell and a certain taste, correct? But it's
not active anymore?
It's inactive as a chemical.
Sure, you're getting into a range where I'm gonna say I talk to our process engineers. I'm not gonna talk about something that I don't know all the details. So I'm gonna be
I
honest.
know nothing about it, but I have to answer to it when residents call and say, I smell chlorine in my water.
Sure.
And
It would, if they smell it, it's active in the water. You're not gonna have the smell of chlorine with water that has inactive chlorine.
exactly, but it happens at certain times and it's usually when residences leave for a certain time and then they come back. And that's why, and this happens to be in one of the lower parts of St. Helens.
Like I said, we could use the model to further analyze that, but that's not something we.
Okay, I'm just curious,
Yeah.
because I need to know how to answer citizens who call and want to know. I just refer them to the water department.
And they would be the best one at this time, to answer that.
Can I jump in on this, please? Chlorine is a gas, and you dissolve it in the water to a level that typically you can't taste, but it's to a level that will kill bugs. If you heat the water, the chlorine will come out back as a gas. Then you can smell it. If you somehow can get it to return as a gas. The other way to get rid of chlorine, it binds with something else. And one of the things it could bind with is the metals in the pipe and things like that. And some of those compounds will be in there, you won't be able to taste it. But if you analyze for it, you have an idea that something is chemically eroding. So you go from a dissolved gas to a free gas to a chemical compound. If it sits long enough, it will return to a gas. In fact, top of reservoirs, unless you stir them, the chlorine dissipates and goes out the vents.
So these are giving us a presentation on our water needs in area, and we shouldn't really be going into biology. If we want to talk to Sharon, our water filtration people.
I do want to-
Questions, I just try to keep you all focused. We have a meeting here at 6, or renewal at 6:30. And we also have an executive session, so I do want to make sure that we're staying on topic in our discussion. This is our first item on our agenda. We're 40 minutes in with no public comment.
So I just want to clarify one thing, if you could, Counselor, is as a safety thing, the city doesn't use chlorine gas. They don't
Use a
chlorine-
chemical.
They use it in, it's a liquid form. It's not gas. It's a safety risk that most communities have gone away from. So just, I want to make sure you're
You-
aware of that.
When a chemical breakdown, it can return to it as a gas.
Fair enough. We can get into the chemistry discussion.
But the question is, you didn't test for that. That was the whole point.
That's not part of our scope.
Okay, good. Now, and obviously that answers the next question. You know what the chemistry level is at the pump heads, but you don't test at the street front.
And we didn't test it either.
Okay.
As part of our scope.
Now, in one of the what's in disaster, is there any place in the system that a major main would break, seismically or whatever, that would compromise the whole system? Is there a single point failure in the system?
There's an entire section of the report for the seismic resiliency plan that addresses that specific question. Probably the most vulnerable part of it is that Pittsburgh line that is older pipe, and that's the reason for the capital improvement plan to replace that line.
$680,000. I seen that
So it's, to answer your question, that would be the bigger item of concern.
We do have basically at this point, we do have a single disaster possibility.
You have a number of them. Every system does.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Doesn't every
And
system-
when I have to discuss why do we replace this, when you point out you have a single point or multi-point major disaster that screws the system up.
Yeah. and
Okay, that's
it's
good.
Well covered in the.
Now, one of the comments that was asked about putting a large reservoir over here and the pressure is too high, does the system have any automatic pressure control systems in the system?
PRVs. Yeah, I believe.
There's
a
one
couple.
up in the Elk Ridge development, but between the high and main pressure zone, there's no pressure control valves that intertie the two.
Okay, and once upon a time, we had some mains that had to be cleaned up or blown down, and they hadn't exercised the bypass valves. Are there any, looking at, let's say, maintenance schedules for control systems, I guess, is bypasses and that, was that part of your system?
I think how to best answer that.
Valve replacement.
We recommend starting a valve exercising as the O&M activity, so going and testing and exercising the valves to make sure they're all operating properly.
As well as the flushing program.
Yeah.
Regularly flushing on a regular schedule, that's all part of the recommendations in the master plan.
Where, as I said, once upon a time, we had something, we lost water in one part of the town because one of the bypass things hadn't been exercised, they couldn't open.
I will say this, there are certain parts of the system that's a little fragile. And that's part of the capital improvement plan is to replace some of those pipelines that have some valves that I don't think the operating staff are very comfortable operating. And so it's a matter of needing to replace those so that you can do those regular flushing and valve operation. So it's the importance of the capital improvement plan and following.
I'm gonna go back to now, major water flows for industrial fires. How easy would it be to triple the water flow to our industrial area?
It's not easy at all.
Thank
You're
you.
gonna have big money to increase the pipe sizes.
That brings me to my one and only question. Well, so for future fire, we have a big water tank and pumps, water rights to the pumps down at Boise Cascade, which is currently partially being used by Boise. Not a whole lot, way under capacity. It has a huge water filtration system down there. And we have 4 different pumps with water rights for millions and millions of dollars, or millions and millions of gallons. Should the city look at using that area, targeting that area fire suppression system with that, and looking to the future and the demand, we're talking 20, 50 years out. What I'm telling you right now, sitting here as mayor and being over public works, that there was no future planning from our predecessors. And you guys are gonna be, probably hear from Steve Donovan. And you're gonna be aware of what we have up against us here in a short period of time with water, sewer, storm. Yeah.
Boy, I concur
So-
with that.
So my question is that something we should be looking at? To alleviate at least a section of town?
It potentially could, you could have a separate fire,
Yeah.
hydrant system. Mixing the systems becomes a risk.
Yes.
So
But
I'll say
the
that.
Armstrong, Boise area out to the corner of Old Portland Road, out towards Armstrong, we go across the bridge.
You could have a dedicated fire,
System.
you could have a dedicated fire system that would provide that 3,500 gallon minute that we've identified as its own. When you have two systems, you also have double the cost of
Yes.
establishing it. So it's, I wouldn't say
We have a
no.
fairly good sized tank at Boise that is a holding tank
Fair enough.
and a water filtration system at the
I
same.
think we identified about 900,000 or 840,000 gallons for that. Well,
So a fire suppression now is potable water.
currently, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because we also have pumps that could pull out the Multnomah Channel, but that would require a dedicated
That's what I'm
fire
talking
system.
That's what we're talking about.
about.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I just wanted, that was my only question for you guys.
I had one. Seems very minuscule now after this, but you guys talked about the unaccounted for water that can be improved by 18%, and the average is 10. Was that a part of your note with developed detection program? So was that, and was there like I didn't look through the whole thing, so I apologize, it's very long, but was there a good chunk of like direction that Public Works and stuff can look into solving maybe that issue or?
yeah, the leak detection is really key there, but then it's also documentation and tracking, the hydrant flushing and accurately doing that. The meter replacement, the city's been doing that. That's usually our low hanging fruit with a community, is saying, replace your meters, because you're probably not tracking it accurately. So you may be less, 10% or less, you just don't know it. But I think the city here is doing, they're addressing that, the Public Works Department.
You said try to get it down by 5% in 5 years, right?
So 10% is AWWA says you're doing good. You likely don't need to invest a lot into it. And so we just recently saw, someone else with even less, and we questioned it. And we found out because it's probably not accurate measurement. And so they're probably more about 8-9%, what we determined or what we're assuming. So at 18, not huge red flags, but it's something to address. It's kind of like wastewater with I&I. You got to constantly work on it. And so that leak detection program is not something that's one and done. It's something that would be on a regular program that you would do, and the Public Works staff would address it as they identify those leaks. Sometimes you find bigger ones than others, and sometimes you hear, they identify a leak and they can't find it. That's the nature of the work.
That's Berkeley.
I have to one up Counselor Chilton. No. I did look at every page, looked at
Did
it,
you?
fast
I
fast
scanned,
scroll
yeah,
of the-
scanning.
okay, so I did fast scroll, but anyway, thank you very much. It was eye-opening, and I concur with Councilor Morton about the needing to address the fire safety issues, but so, no, I might have some other questions another time, but it's a great report. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is a good report. And one of the things I wanted to follow up with Councilor Chilton's comment. We drained our reservoir several times in terms of detection.
Mm.
Now,
We looked at that.
would that factor into the high percentage in a sense that you're alluding to?
It does.
That's what I kind of figured. When I
When you
look and they go, yeah, well, we had to drain that, 3 times? So,
It's one of the components.
6 times?
Six.
6 times.
Okay, that's like 2% we can knock off.
Yeah. Well, and we talked with Sharon and them and talked about that as being one of the potentials.
All right. Hey, thank you.
Yes.
gentlemen.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
Yep, have a good day. Okay, our next item on the agenda is system development charges, SDC. See Donovan with Donovan Enterprise Inc.
Now the fun begins.
Hi,
Hey.
Hey.
welcome back.
glad to be back. All right,
I'm just gonna grab a cup of coffee if I'm being rude.
Steve Matt Brown, Finance Director, worked with Steve along with John, so that on the update that we're gonna see here. I wanted to preface the council that our goal at the end of this little discussion is for Steve and staff to have direction from council on how you would like to move forward. Steve's gonna present some recommendations that rates for SDCs that we would like to recommend to the council. We are looking for direction from you on how you would like us to move forward after you see the presentation.
Okay, that might take a while, and it might be a good thing that we look over that material for a possible couple of weeks into our next session. I've always said that we, even though we'll be deliberating, it's hard to make a decision so quickly after a consulting report. It's like snap decision. Oh, 2 months, 2 months from now, I go, ooh, we should have looked at that a little better and so we can, I don't know if you heard what I was saying or not, Mayor, but.
I did.
You did?
No, I didn't.
the answer is real easy. We're asking for no decisions today, and we want you to take all the time you need. We
Okay.
know this is a sensitive topic for you, and it's a corollary to something else we're going to present to you next month, and that's the rates. And these are hand in glove, so we appreciate your hassle, okay? No decisions today. Sit back, strap in, have a cup of coffee, and watch the show.
I just want to update, the mayor and the rest of the council. Matt asked for a decision today, I believe. Is that?
No, I'm sorry that it came out that way. It's that we're gonna give you the presentations, but we can't come back with any kind of resolution or direction unless you as a council give us direction. So like I said, it doesn't have to be today, but we will need some direction for you to come back.
Okay.
I'm gonna kick it
Have
off.
a cup of coffee. Go
You
ahead, Steve.
ready? I'm Steve Donovan, 9600 Southwest Oak, Suite 335, Portland, Oregon.
You don't have to.
Portland, oh no.
We're going to present to you a very short presentation today. There's a big report that I've authored that you can chew on. I'm particularly proud about this piece because John and Jacob and Matt, and Mohammed and Sharon all played critical roles in developing this analysis. We were doing Teams meetings quite regularly, and it's really rare for me to have a city manager sit in and kicking the tires on, the micro managing of the stuff that these analyses. So that's kind of refreshing to see that.
That's good.
Basically, what I was saying is
Manager.
there was some adult supervision here today. So let's jump into it. I think this is less than 10 slides. I think what we're going to do after this is more conversation, and we're going to have presentation.
Okay.
So for those of you, we did this in 2017. We've got pretty seasoned folks here. You know most of this stuff, but for running the numbers here, what is an SDC? And then we'll talk about, go ahead, go back to that. I want to talk about we're going to review methodologies. This is a critical term in the SDC law. And by the way, there's a state law that governs SDCs, and there's your city code. And you might want to ask, well, why do we have all this damn regulation on SDCs? It's because cities abused SDCs badly in Oregon in the past. And the legislature had to put their foot down. And I can give you many examples, but we did as elected bodies abuse SDCs. And we were guilty of it. Current charges, what do you charge now and how do you charge? That's something I want to make sure you understand. And then what the limitations of SDCs are. There's a lot of folks that think that SDCs are this panacea, this magic bullet that's gonna save you and we're gonna rebuild our system with SDCs. No, that's not gonna happen. And there's a reason for that too. And then we're gonna talk about the proposed versus current. And then we're gonna kick it around here because I know this is important issues for you folks. So go ahead. Kathy, you running this? Quick and dirty, SDCs are one-time fees on new development. They're not charged to ratepayers. And they're paid at the time of development. They're intended to only recover a fair share of the costs of existing and planned capacity to serve growth. So you heard Peter talking about, you gotta replace a lot of the lines up on Pittsburgh Road. You can't pay SDCs for any of that because it's replacement. We use SDCs to pay for capacity expanding facilities that serve growth. Growth pays for growth. Fair is fair. That's what the legislation says. And now what is an SDC? It's made up of two pieces. A reimbursement fee, which is a fee that a new customer will pay for existing capacity that you pay for and that's in the ground and ready to serve. An improvement fee is for planned future capacity. Last fall, we were here, we did the sewer master plan and the stormwater master plan. And now we just did the water master plan. These guys spent a lot of time and a lot of detailed analysis determining what's replacement and what's future capacity. And I appreciate the fact that Keller does that. Not all engineering firms are that down to detail. So go ahead, next slide. This is important in the sense that here's what you're paying right now for a single family home. And we always put this in the frame of what does a single family home pay? Different kinds of land uses and businesses will pay completely different than what a residential customer does. But the lion's share of your new development is going to be residential, mostly single family, a lot of multifamily. Now, what people don't understand is for each service, there's a different unit of demand that we use. For water and sewer, it's the 3/4 inch meter equivalent. That meter, how much water can we serve you? Or how much water can come out of the system, back into your sewer system? For stormwater, it's impervious surface, and your code defines a unit of impervious surface, a residential equivalent of 2,500 square feet. And 2 years ago, we went a considerable amount of work. Remember, you used to let our homes or businesses that were on creeks, you were waived the fee. We went through and redefined what your code is. We got those people now into the system to pay. I know you guys took pretty good lashing over that, but you did the right thing. Everybody's paying. And so now you've got your stormwater up to what I would call modern standards. For parks.
Can I explain to some of the counselors that like Walmart was one of them, and so the storm is actually to and from your home to Walmart. That's actually what you're paying for. You know, that we did on the parking lot itself and size on particular those type of situations, but it's really the travel back and forth, the oils that are getting on the road that we have to actually treat through our system.
And really what it's about here is, and Mayor, you're right.
Explain that, yeah.
Why do we charge for stormwater services, or why are we doing it? Well, because we have two things. We have water quantity and we have water quality. And water quantity is localized flooding. If that home on the creek or Walmart is not paying, they're still driving on your streets, right? They're still demanding that you have storm drainage systems to get the water off your street. They're getting free service is really what happens there. And you noticed that, you addressed it, and you brought, Sharon, how many customers do you remember did we bring in? Several hundred?
It was close to several.
That weren't being charged, that now are being charged.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, a couple hundred.
Yep.
And it was a pretty big effort, but my point here is, what's a unit of demand for stormwater is impervious surface, 2,500 square feet. Whereas for water and sewer, it's the meter equivalent. For parks, it's population, per acres per thousand population is the demand for parks. And then for transportation, it's PM peak hour vehicle trips. What I'm trying to tell you here is there's a lot of moving parts that come into these SDC calculations. However, if you look at it, Each single family home pays a freight on each one of those services that sums up to $13,614 right now. Go ahead. So what are the limitations? SDCs cannot be used for maintenance and operation of the systems. SDCs collected and are specific and can be only spent on the service they're collected for. Here's another example where many sins of our past. There was one city, they decided they wanted to build a new city hall and they ran out of money. So they took all of the cash balances in their SDC funds and plowed it toward building the city hall. How much capacity did they add to their utilities by building the city hall? So, I mean, that's just the basic fairness. And now, within statutes, the reimbursement fee calculations promote the objective of future system users contributing no more than an equitable share to the cost of the existing facilities. That's kind of the mantra of really of this whole game we're playing here is new development should pay for its fair share of the cost to serve them. And now you think about that. So let's say a mayor of the city wants to think about building a new house. What happens when he builds that house and pays that SDC? He becomes a customer of the system and he has to pay rates, right? So we've got to balance that fairness of what does he pay to connect to the system versus what does he pay when he's part of the ratepayer. And this is a conversation we're going to have in a few minutes about your sewer system. Go ahead. So here is, without driving you nuts, we're proposing to make the whole suite of SDCs go up to $18,800 from the current cost of $13,600. And the biggest increase is in sewer. Storm went up quite a bit too because of stormwater master plan last fall that we talked about and the sewer that we talked about last fall. Water, frankly, is kind of flat because most of your water improvements are replacement. There's very little SDC eligibility on those water projects. So let's talk about, I know this is what you're interested in the next slides, is where are you relative to everybody else in the neighborhood? So here's water, and like I said, you're currently paying $3,361. We're talking knocking that down to $3,100. So we're basically saying no increase, but you're very low relative to these other communities. And we included like Happy Valley and Gresham because Mohammed wanted to see what are the east side of the Portland communities paying. And as you can see, they rely heavily on those SDCs. Go ahead, Stuart, next one. Here's where we're talking about an increase going from $4,100 now to about $6,100, completely a function of the SDC eligibility of that stormwater or sewer master plan that we presented and that Keller gave you last year. So stormwater, 100% function of the master plan, what we're proposing to put in. If you think about your stormwater system right now, it's under capacity. We know that. We've known that for years. Doug, you pointed this out, remember 2 years ago when we were talking about this. If we're under capacity, how are we going to pay for this? Well, first of all, we got to get more ores in the water to get all customers who aren't paying. And frankly, we got to upsize because one of the big ones, the Columbia Street, is that the big project, Columbia Boulevard project, it's undersized now. Under 5-year stormwater events, I think you're surcharging. Sharon can correct me on that. It's undersized and we need to expand capacity for it. Go ahead, next one. Transportation is frankly pretty modest relative to everybody else. This is the big bull in the china shop going down the road for folks in most communities. Transportation SDCs, you look at Happy Valley, they're paying $10,000 per house. Washington County, they just made a statement that we're not going to build any more roads unless we have somebody to pay for it. And that means growth is going to have to pay for it. And I think you're going to be facing that too. Because as these communities in the Portland area are getting more and more expensive and less land to build, you're a very attractive option for folks. Extremely attractive. And I mean, your waterfront project, I mean, I've got folks in other parts of the state that are just drooling at what a jewel you've got there. What an opportunity you've got. I mean, that is one of the most beautiful reaches of the Columbia River with a flat, open land that's, doesn't have to be redeveloped. It's virgin land to go. So you've got a lot going for you. So, go ahead, next slide. Parks, we didn't do parks because we're anticipating that you're gonna have a new parks master plan coming your way. Jacob is petitioning for that. He can get you up on that. So we're not proposing any change to your parks master plan right now. We did it in 2017, and you had a really, really good parks master plan done by the students at the University of Oregon, I think it was, and one of the best parks master plans I've ever worked with, frankly. And I see some of these big the architectural firms, the landscape architects, they'll charge you $300,000. And I think they write it in Greek. I mean, sometimes they're just incomprehensible. So if you could replicate what you did in 2015, I think it was, you'd be well served.
That was our assistant planning director, Tim Show.
I mean, these were students that did this, and it was just amazing.
I think that was a different project for looking at Columbia View Park Road extension was the PSU students.
No, this, I think it was the University of Oregon.
The rare program.
Yeah.
Rare program.
What a bunch of smart kids, Jesus.
Yeah.
So he wasn't an employee at the time.
Yeah, okay, that way, and that way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't mean to quibble, sorry.
But question, how long ago were our SDCs updated?
2017, we did them. Remember when we did the rates last?
Did we?
No, we didn't do a lot. No, we didn't. We didn't do a lot.
Small adjustments, we didn't do, you didn't see any large increases because we had not done master
Master
plans
plans.
in 10+
I
years.
mean, it was like maybe 15% or something like that.
Not even that much. It was pretty small.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty small.
I'd like to interrupt and ask a question while everyone's head is spinning and thinking about this. And we know that we are having huge apartment complexes in the make.
Right.
Now, I just kind of go, how does that affect our storm? Because there could be 100 units in one of those complexes. Now,
With a lot of impervious surface, right? A lot of runoff.
a lot of runoff. How does that affect the equation of, or does it at all? You just take the impervious runoffs and that's what they pay for?
Correct. Units of impervious surface. That's exactly right.
That's it.
That's exactly right.
And we missed that. They got in on the cheap.
That large development's already paid their SDCs.
Right. And so this is what we call that leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
And you're right. So really what we're driving at here, we have the next slide, and then I'm gonna shut up and.
Thank you for-
You bet. So here what we're talking about is raising you from $13,600 to $18,100. You'll be a couple of bucks above Scappoose, by the way. They're raising their SDCs on July 1st for inflation, so they will be above that proposed number. So what we're talking about here is still, Mayor, it's a pretty modest increase. I was expecting more, but now it tells me this, from a rate planner standpoint, if a lot of the costs in those master plans were for replacement and repair and fixing existing problems, and you can't put it on growth back,
Yeah.
what does that mean for your rates?
That means that we're gonna have a big council meeting.
That means this guy here is not gonna be your favorite camper, because I'm gonna come to you with some bad news. And next month, we're gonna come to you with rates, and we're gonna ask you some tough questions. And there's gonna be a question on Basin 6 and the sewer here at this meeting tonight that we're gonna have, or this afternoon that we're gonna talk about. So we're not asking for any action or legislative action today. We recommend that you raise your SDCs from 13.6 to 18.8 on July 1st, so that we can capture the correct amount of revenue from growth to pay for growth. Now, does that mean you have to do that? Does the statute say, because Donovan came in and said, here's the number, you gotta do that? No. You may make a policy decision to say, we don't want to raise our SDCs, and we're making a conscious decision that we want our ratepayers to subsidize growth. There are many communities, not many, there are communities that do that. Astoria doesn't have SDCs because their fishing and their industries over there simply don't exist anymore. So they want to do anything they can to attract industry and attract growth. Coos Bay, another coastal community. They don't have logging and they don't have fishing anymore. They want to attract growth. I don't think that's a good policy for you folks to follow because growth is coming your way. Yeah, you can't close the door. You're in a very attractive location. You've got great highway access and you've got a population to the east that's gonna be thinking, boy, this is a really attractive place to live. And I'll shut up and you guys take it away.
In this business, let's go to stormwater. And we're talking about, what happens if the city has raised the roads, basically changed the landscape, and no longer does the water from this impervious surface flow into the city, but the city flows into them? Obviously, there's been a change. Does this affect the SDCs at all?
Sure, but where are you gonna get the $200 million to raise your streets?
What happens if you already raise the streets and it's going?
I don't think it has. And I mean, that's just.
These cities in town, where over the years, just repaving has moved the streets above private property.
But we still got localized flooding as a city.
Oh, yeah.
We still got water quality issues.
Yeah.
That are gonna come your way. We can't say if this goes away, your answer is of course they would go down because there's, you've mitigated the problem, you've mitigated the need. In other words, you built capacity in another way to serve stormwater on the back of transportation.
Yeah, exactly.
So in your numbers here, you're projecting that, I mean, you know, that costs are, have gone up and Scappoose is getting ready to do that. Have you also projected future cost in factored in that? I mean, this isn't something like, when I'm not sitting here, I'm coming back down as a citizen and saying, why are you trying to raise rates? We just raised them significantly 5 years ago.
The answer is no. The answer, and the reason is that is we adjust this, we take snapshots like every 5 years, right? So 2017 we did, then we came back in 2022 and we true up again.
Yeah.
And in between these planning periods, we adjust for inflation, which you should be doing and you have not been doing, is you adjust for inflation.
Yeah.
And then every 5th year you get new master plans and then costs go what they are based on the best new snapshot. And then we do this 5-year thing. So the answer is, we've taken the numbers that have come out of your master plan, and they're just a snapshot, and they're a forward look. And I can only promise you one thing, they're wrong. You know that, and I know that. They're the best guess at the time. And what the future cost is what it's gonna be. What it is today will be different.
So one last question for you that I have is, we plan on creating a park over on Ross Road. We city acquired some property off of Maple, Furlock, to extend sewer and water up through there and serve a whole new future growth of St. Helens. Would you recommend, or could we actually factor that project into SDCs for that area? And just project it over to R7?
Sure you could.
And is that something we could do out of that pool of money prior to even capturing it?
Sure.
Parks falls under there. So if we chose to put the money in parks.
But yeah, we're running sewer and water. My question is the sewer and water, because there's multiple.
As long as you're building, or what you can serve is, or you're expanding your infrastructure out to these areas,
Yes,
and there's nothing there now, and it's all to serve growth,
yes.
that's 100% SDC
It's
eligible.
new, it's not replacement.
Right. If there's any component of that investment that's for replacement, repair, or fixing deficiencies,
Yes.
then that percent you cannot include.
So what about deficiencies that are because of the demand of that future growth?
Lost me.
So like, let's say I approach the city and I say, I wanna put a development over here, I wanna put 100 houses. And they go, well, you can't because there's, just down the road, it won't meet the capacity.
Well, I just had us on the phone with Sharon about this. This is a great, you got 2 ways to go.
Yes.
One, you could calculate into your SDCs, pump up your SDCs, and that development then would pay SDCs to reimburse you for the capacity that you invested in.
Mhm.
Or second, you could say, like many cities do, we're not gonna expand our system, serve you. You as a how many of you folks were on the planning commission before you're on the council? Well, on planning commissions, you have what are called conditions of land use approval. And you would condition that, Mr. Developer, you want to build your 400 unit apartment complex and you want water and sewer, you're gonna have to build it to our standard and convey it to us as a condition of land use approval in order for your subdivision to come in. This happens all the time. And this could be an option for you in Basin 6. We're gonna talk about on sewer in a little bit. But that's one of the tools in your kit, is using land use conditions of approval to make that happen. But there's a dark side to that. It says, by definition, we're making a policy that we're not gonna grow our city. And you know about infrastructure, it's the chicken and the egg, right? You gotta have infrastructure in place to serve growth, otherwise growth won't come. But we don't have the money to pay for the infrastructure to serve growth. So where does this money come from? So this is where the balance of SDCs and rates and smart guys like John trying to find grants and everything else you can find to make that happen. This is the struggle that we go through and that you're going through right now.
How many times you come before a municipality with SDCs like us and deal with urban expansion?
Urban growth boundary expansion?
Yes.
I hear it waved all the time. I hear people, mostly developers, saying, we got to expand the urban growth boundary. But that's a very difficult thing to do because you have to have, John, a 20-year supply of land within your urban growth boundary at all times. You have to prove that that's sufficient. And then if you do want to do your urban growth expansion, you have to petition Land Conservation and Development Commission, LCDC. So it's out of your hands. And a lot of times, you know, the developers mostly get upset about that. But your hands are very, very much tied by Oregon statute on how that works.
It's a lengthy process, I
Yes,
know.
it is.
And since it's a lengthy process and we're looking 10 years down the line, a lengthy process can mean 5 to 6 to 7 to 10 years.
Oh, and then there's litigation. Usually what'll happen, you'll go through LUBA, you hear land use and the LUBA, because of there's one interest group that wants to expand to promote growth. But there's also a fairly vocal no growth community out there too. And an environmental community that says, we've got to get denser. We've got to fill up. We don't want to build out because that's wasteful on the environment. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It happens all the time in these communities that I go to.
Right, bring it up.
How easy is it to prove that you have enough land, buildable land within your boundary right now?
It's an art form. There are law firms in Portland, San Francisco, and Seattle that make a good living doing just that. There are metrics that you use. There are a series of analyses that are set up. You have the goal system under LUBA and how that's calculated. But there's a very stringent testing process that's done to prove that.
For example,
There's the guy.
in the last couple of years, we approved our housing needs analysis. And that showed that within the
Sufficient.
planning period, we're okay. So if we wanted to expand our UGB based on residential land, we don't have a chance.
Yes.
And Doug, that's kind of the reason, like, you brought up a good point. But just to say we need to expand the urban growth boundary, you're spitting in the wind by saying
Our
that.
urban growth boundary is actually fairly large.
Yeah, we were blessed with our original urban growth boundary in that it was huge.
Yeah, yep, goes almost out to Bennett Road.
I know you folks are busy. You got a lot on your plate today. So I want you to just chew on this. 13 grand to 18 grand. We don't want an answer today, but we got to get some signs from the dugout release today, okay?
You have one question about storm. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, you're fine. I'll just go after you.
Okay, the storm fund, it almost tripled.
Feet, SDC, yeah,
Almost tripled.
Yeah. yep.
And that's
Now,
what's gonna
it
happen.
seems to me that's a huge surprise. I think last year at our budget meeting, it seemed to be a pretty solid line. I knew it was kind of going up just a bit, but tripled.
Completely a function of, go ahead, maybe.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think what you're referring to is our actual rates
Yes,
versus this is the SDCs.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Because
that.
rates we had going like that, but actually they were getting ready to fall off too, remember? Well, it was the only one on there that was really
Yeah, I guess my question is, why didn't that correlate with that? And why didn't we see that with our budget? Okay, even though these are two different kinds of things, this tells me
Real easy answer,
that
Doug.
in the future, this is like almost tripled.
Mhm.
Holy moly, in
Got
that, you
some
know,
catching up to do.
The answer is that we split those. We split those, remember when we split those budgetary? Because they really needed to be their own for this type of purpose, but the sewer and the storm used to be together.
And the reason the SDC for stormwater is going up so much is completely a function of the capital improvement plan. It's in the master plan. And the percentage of the cost of that plan that are attributable to growth, to serve growth.
right.
That's 100%, it's just math, frankly.
It was $81 million, I think, on this.
Remember when you guys were whistling last fall going, how much?
Bottom number, I think, was 81 million, which is, yeah, long-term plan.
And I don't question it a bit.
Counselor Chilton?
I just wanted to say that, as we, broach this topic, I know it's gonna be a big one and it's gonna be, lively. So my expectations for the next proposal is to really see some, what the results could be. That's one of the things I feel like we're gonna have to sell this to the community about what are the potential results? What are you gonna be paying for? Like, what's gonna happen with this funding?
It's a very reasonable thing to ask.
I'm just letting you know, that's an expectation that I wanna see, so that I can, stand behind this, if that's the way we go, so.
I want to go to a question of new sewer system. And it's inadequate, or whatever. And all of a sudden, there's a new federal or state rule of what this sewer system has to do. Something that we haven't had to do before. Is that considered new, or is that having to do with the repair?
Rates, that's the ratepayer,
Okay.
100% on the back of the ratepayer. And you are probably pretty prescient here on that, because federal guidelines are expanding every year. 20 years ago, there was some rules that came out on how you operate, maintain your sewer system called CMOM. I forgot what, Sharon probably knows it. But that had to do with maintenance, and it had to do with cities over 10,000. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
So it's coming.
This question goes to Matt, if I can answer.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so since the stormwater is going to have that much, how much effect is that going to have on our budgetary issues this coming budget? If indeed we stay with $821, or if we go to $2,177.
Storm slide up.
What's the
There you go.
so what is the effect on our budget?
For your stormwater SDCs, it will not be a budgetary effect because it doesn't affect operations. Where we're going to hit you in May with the utility rates and the updated master plans is the operations and maintenance for all of these systems. Since we have not done master plans for many years, and now we have them, we know where the deficiencies are and where we should be as a best practice. And I will tell you right now, we are very far off of where we should be. And that goes from years and years of past. As Mary mentioned, past policies and predecessors of stuff that was and wasn't done.
Yeah.
So now we're at that cliff point almost to the extent for water, sewer and storm as far as the operations fund. And that is one of the most difficulties this budget year, in addition to the general fund as well. It's not going to be a happy, all golden in this upcoming budget year. John and I have been working through the budget over the last 5-6 months now, and it's still a struggle to make things work with the capital improvement plans and the maintenance of where it should be as opposed to where we are. To give you an example, you heard about the water master plan today. We've obviously done storm and sewer. For example, the stormwater, I believe the annual maintenance estimate from Keller Associates and what they're proposing is roughly around $800,000 or so a year for stormwater, if I recall. In the past, for many years, when I started back in 2015, and my predecessor and the person before that, it has always been budgeted around 100 to 200, 150 grand.
Yeah.
And not all of that was ever spent as well. It may have been budgeted, but no projects or capital improvements were actually done in stormwater, so that money was never spent. Improvements and maintenance were never done in previous years, and now we're coming to that point.
Yeah, it just seems to me so simple that SDCs, if something triples, damn near triples, our budgetary should almost track that. SDCs are going to go up, well, our budgetary issues with stormwater will go up also. Almost at the same rate, I would think, I would anticipate. Here, stormwater spikes. I mean, this is a huge spike, tripling.
So it was
And so,
2 years ago, we update about every 2 years on our water rate, and we did actually, it was highly recommended to the council at the time, which was us three, that we go bigger on our storm than we did.
I remember that last year, in our budget meeting, that we looked at that and it was starting to go up, and I think we got a bit of a warning that, yeah, we got to really look at this. But man, this is massive. I mean, this is a massive indicator of what I'm in for.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on the mayor, and I think almost every year during budget time, I've come to you with, hey, we should increase it this much. And you as a policymaker make that decision, and I can just give recommendations. But on the rate increases of operations, that was based on, as Steve Donovan mentioned, a snapshot in time of where we are and what we knew at that time. So even last year and the year before that, we made a budgetary approval on the basis of what we understood at that time. And now we have a master plan that's outlined all of these deficiencies, and we can make the choice to put our heads in the sand and not worry about it until something major happens. Or we can start to change the trend and make improvements along the way, which in turns means utility rate increases as well as SDC improvements. And like Steve mentioned as well, water, sewer, and storm, you're going to see, well, other than water, increases in the SDC rates. There are not a lot of projects, in my opinion, in the master plan that are fully SDC eligible.
Hardly, no, none.
And that's one of the issues we have is we're going to be collecting this fee because it's the fair share, and it's corresponds with the fair share amount of what's in the plan. But some of the projects in the master plan are 7% SDC eligible. So on a $6 million project, only 7% can be paid by SDCs. And that's outlined in the master plan of what percentage in each project.
Got your head spinning enough?
Any other questions?
So,
I heard somebody.
I think it's Patrick.
well,
That was John too.
Some moaning down
I
there.
know.
I'm done, I'm chewing on things.
Well, things to think about. If you want to go first, or
We'll give you the
Rock,
final
paper,
word,
scissors.
okay?
No, I think, Councilor Chilton was saying about selling to the public and having our ducks in, having the information. I do believe that we are in a position that once we do have to grapple with this, that we do have things we didn't have Those are the three master plans. We've done this.
Yes.
We've done this study. We have a lot of information. So we do, I think, have a firm foundation in which to build. The challenge is going to be for us to communicate that. So I, as much as anyone else would not, if I were a developer, would not want to be as a resident, I certainly don't want to see. I want to live and Doug, Councilor Morton, you pointed out again, our mission, and that's what we're here to do, is to preserve the highest quality life, provide for safe and healthy environment with that. These three things, the infrastructure to serve, to provide this, it's essential. It's essential. So I really thank you for providing this information.
So just, this is fantastic. It's just real high level. Earlier in the Keller's presentation, they talked about on the water system is that they recommend $106 million annual contribution towards capital improvement projects. And, you know, wow, that's a big number. We're not doing that. I mean, we can't do that. And so where does that money come from? And so you have your SDCs, which are a source of revenue. You have development potentially helping out along the way. They can get that as a condition if it's not up to service. You know, grants if we're lucky, and the rest is rates. And you know, rates is the basic operation and maintenance piece of it, where there's a certain amount there, and then it's whatever else above rates can go to capital. And that's where we've been, and we're not alone. I mean, it's across the spectrum. You couldn't charge enough for these systems. Every community is playing this game catch up, and we're way behind. You know, if you have a street that lasts 20 years, and if you're not paying that into a fund to rebuild the street 20 years, you're catching up. And with the exception of probably new cities like Wilsonville that have all these systems in place on onset, and they're going to be good for a while. You know, they're growing rapidly. There's lots that they have other feeds that they're doing, and developers paying for all these new streets. It's such a really challenging situation, and we're not alone in this, but doesn't make any comfort or misery. That's
So my thing would be to, and not to sell it, but just to be factual, is that I'm talking to people out there, is that our predecessors didn't do the proper planning. At some point, they forgot to take a look. It was sufficient at the time when you're only getting 20 permits a year. When you're getting 20 permits every quarter. The last how many years? They did not do future planning, and we have to be proactive and also be not just fixing to up to grade, but also looking at future growth and strategically pinpointing, asking about fire suppression systems in certain areas. We utilize this. Do we look at putting a whole new trunk line in somewhere to alleviate some of this other over here? Also knowing that we have future growth, our sewer is sufficient right now. But I have personally talked to Scappoose a number of times about sharing a joint sewer halfway between us and St. Helens. 50 years out, it's not a pipe dream. It's definitely not. And I've brought this up in this meeting a number of times. It was approached to us by Northwest Natural, and they said they would help us out with putting pipe in the ground. I've literally talked to county commissioners about collecting SDCs outside of our UGB for if there was commercial properties coming in, because it falls underneath their boundary. And they said, absolutely. And you think we can figure out a metrics of setting that up? We can have water and sewer go from here to Scappoose.
You know as well as I do, all of you, that this utility business, to be successful, is all about scale.
Yep.
You gotta have scale to make these unit costs pan out. And you don't have scale. And when you were developed in the 50s and the 60s, you had some huge mills that subsidized all of the residents.
And measure 5 and 50 is why we.
The world
are-
has changed.
Collins is really in a
And the
bad.
monkey is on your back now.
Well, I think it's just even besides the rate, so I've talked with John and Matt outside of this meeting. And we need to have a more secure plan in place for rates and as the city grows, making sure that we're not in this situation again. So I would like to see that as a topic of conversation in the future also.
That'll be
So
next month.
I totally agree with that, because one of the reasons the predecessors did not go forward is when we got pressure from builders. And two, because the economy did not help facilitate building at that time. And it was, it just was, everything was dead. Now it's just like taking off. And we are in a hole in a sense as a city.
And the smart thing to do is to capture that growth, that they pay their fair share. Because like you said, that apartment complex that came in that didn't pay the full share.
Yeah.
You by definition
Lost
subsidize
money,
them.
we lost money on that.
Ratepayers
We lost money. on
covered that.
Exactly.
On Broadleaf and on St. Helens Apartments, we lost money. Bottom line is we lost money on that.
Yeah, I think I really think, and I think we talked about this back then, instead of every 5 years, let's do this every 2 years so that we keep abreast of.
Keep Donovan fully employed, huh?
Didn't see, so.
So this one is big and it's shocking to people. But I can tell you the price of lumber went up probably $30,000 to $50,000 for builders. Most of it gets passed along and added to a loan. It gets passed along, added to a loan. The big one, and just be prepared, is the rate increase that's coming.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, that's the big one. That is gonna be a heavy lift.
Yeah,
This seems like a lot, and it is, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but it's gonna be the rate increase.
For the locals that aren't building.
And, I just want the council to know that Sharon and Mohammed are working diligently, and I've kind of challenged them a little bit as far as looking at our systems and trying to figure out future growth and moving forward and strategically looking at it through a whole new lens. So I just wanna assure everyone that we are doing that, and that's why we've updated our master plans too, so.
For a very long time, the city has been very reactive
Mhm.
and not proactive.
Yes.
And now we have an administration with John, Mohammed, Sharon, Jacob, myself, and a lot of your staff that wants to be proactive. And these are the steps to take to be proactive. And Councilor Chilton, if I wanted to mention too, when you're talking with residents and to the council as well, as much as it is talking about what they get with these rate increases, it's what they don't have to deal with these rate increases.
And that is a benefit also
Whether
that
that be
we
the
get.
fire suppression or the upsizing improvements, everything like that.
People just wanna know where their money's going and how
Sure.
it's being used
Unfortunately,
and why.
Yes,
unfortunately, public works is very expensive and it's all underground and you can't see any of it.
yeah, it's essential.
Well, we can explain it.
Yes.
We can try as best we can to communicate and educate.
Where's
so
Mohammed
let's segue this in, well, that's what we're gonna talk a little bit. And you guys mind if I go ahead and segue our next into, because we take a break at 3, I wanna get Sharon and Jacob to
It'd be
discussion
great,
on this.
'cause I wanna be in on that conversation.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes, so, let's go ahead and go to our next topic, which is to, discussion regarding our sanitary sewer deficiency and development.
I'm sitting on your side.
All related to what's going on with the city of St. Helens right now. So. Come on up.
Join the party, kiddo. Is this a record? Enough people?
No, it's right there.
This is a party.
Perhaps we should begin this line item with, imagine the year 1989.
Yeah,
St. Helens states its master.
yeah, yeah, 1989, yes.
Fast forward.
That was the year I was born.
Okay, so.
So that's last. sewer plant was up.
So I kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of the public sewer system, just before getting into it. So the city currently owns and maintains 61 miles of sewer. And our pipes range from 6 inches, which is pretty small, to 48. The majority of our pipe is 8 inches. And so in early 2000s, we had the inflow and infiltration issue. DEQ gave us a mandate. And at that time, we fixed about 20% of the city's sewers. But we didn't upsize it. So basically what we did was replace size on size, or we lined, or we pipe our size on size. So now we have this new issue, which is capacity. And I don't want to focus too much on the Comstock property. It was kind of just a trigger for this discussion. This is far, this is beyond just one development. This is going to affect a lot of development. So basically, the sewer system has a finite capacity. The last time a full master plan was done was what John said, 1989. We've had a few small ones done, like we did one in 2008 for just the INI program, and then there was one done in the McNulty water area, and that was about it. So you're talking about 33 years that we've been going off of this very old plan, and we haven't accounted for growth. We just basically was flying blind for 33 years.
And for anybody watching, wondered what the I&I project was, it was to actually fix cracks in pipes.
Yeah.
basically.
And that's what it was, that's all it was for. It didn't address
And for
capacity
anybody
at
who's watching,
all.
I just want to make that clear.
So for the past couple of years, we've been working with Keller Associates. They just did the water master plan presentation. The wastewater master plan was presented last year and was adopted in November. And so, and basically just to kind of give you an idea, so the population was 7,500 people in 1989 in this town. Now we're over 14,000. So we're almost double, but their sewer system hasn't changed. And so we're adding all this load and all this load and all this load, and we haven't been upsizing. And so now we've kind of reached kind of that critical mass on it. So on the map here, you can see, so the lines in red are showing where our sewers are at capacity. And these are all our trunk lines. So this isn't even gonna address the smaller lines, which are probably fine, but everything flows to these trunk lines, which eventually flows to our wastewater treatment plant. The red dots are showing where the potential overflows would happen, where those manholes are. And so the Comstock property, for instance, would flow into the Sykes Road, which is that lower red line. I can't point to it, but it's a little bit, yeah. No, the one right above it. That one, yeah. So that's the Sykes Road one. So you can see that one's at capacity, but that's not the main issue. For instance, the Interceptor, which is on 4th Street, the Interceptor line runs from Godfrey Park all the way over to the wastewater treatment plant. And actually the 1989 master plan said that that had capacity issues back then.
Oh,
In
wow.
fact, that was the only line that was mentioned as having capacity issues, was the Interceptor. So not surprised.
Sharon, can I jump in here just a minute on that 4th Street? You remember that cities had problems with Topaz on the sewer and the fact we got rid of stormwater on that very thing. Just want to bring that back up again.
How could we forget?
Good, that's only, it's your turn now.
Okay, so continuing on.
So that has nothing, that's not relevant to the master plan.
Yeah, and this is,
Oh, let's.
That was the I-9, that was an I-9
Yeah,
project.
that's a whole.
That was an I-9 project.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, so we've got the Interceptor that's undersized, the long red line that kind of cuts through the whole center of town on the east side, that's the middle trunk. And that one, we have known problems on all the time. So that one's that one's also undersized. And then we've got some portions of the north trunk and the south trunk continues on. So what we're looking at here is that there's a lot of development that has been happening. That's been connected to the sewer, and we've been like, yeah, great, we have capacity, connect. And we don't.
A question, just on this one little particular spot. If we were to take from 2nd Street up here, because we're doing the corner right here, we're doing that intersection, right? Correct?
Right.
Construction all the way down.
You're talking about the riverfront development.
Yes, and I'm talking about this corner up here. If we were to take all of Second Street from the old school and redirect that down to here, and we're gonna have a lift station down there anyway. It won't alleviate a ton off Fourth Street, but it'll help some, right?
It would take some flow off of the
Yes,
intersection.
Yes, and I would recommend that the council direct staff, and we get ready to do that, to definitely go up part of this hill over here, and take those lines and direct them this way. It's very critical, because Fourth Street still has to be addressed. We know that.
And the Sykes Road, obviously you wanna upsize the downstream pipes first. Yeah, upsize the, like for instance, the Sykes Road and upsize the upstream stuff, and then your downstream is not adequate. So that's another issue as well. Can we see the next slide? So that's just kind of showing the 20-year look ahead and the additional areas. The purple lines are kind of showing the additional areas in addition to what we just saw that would also have capacity issues. We have 2 pump stations that would have to be replaced that are going to be undersized, and basically the entire line on Gable Road will be undersized in 20 years. So almost all of our trunk lines, probably with the exception of the lower south line, which we call the west trunk, which kind of is the one going up Millard Road, is the only one that still has adequate capacity. Everything else is getting there. So like we mentioned before, about the development that's been connecting and not paying into this. For instance, the north trunk, one of the lines that's on capacity, Greystone is just connected to it. We have Columbia Commons subdivision that's also connecting to it. And these lines are already undersized. So like I said, it's not where this pump stop, there's a lot of it. And then Elk Ridge 87 is coming through. And that's gonna be a huge development. And that's also going into a sewer system that's also undersized as well. So this is pretty large. So next steps, did you wanna?
Yeah, and so when we were talking about this earlier, we said, well, you know, ultimately, this will be a regular session action item. However, it is very much tied with the SDC and the utility rate discussion, and so maybe the thought should continue with all that as a package. But in discussing it, you know, we thought about our options. We can just do nothing and assume that the SDC's and utility rates will take care of it, and we can just address it and deal with the issues as they happen. We can require a fee that is in addition to system development charges for someone who taps into these systems that's based on.
And Steve talked about that.
And I can talk about this. Other communities do this as a, once again, conditions of land use approval that we talked about, say that subdivision wants to come in. You could condition him to say, you can't build the system because we're at capacity, but you can pay us a fee in lieu of construction to connect to the system. Fees in lieu of are used all the time. For this situation, John and Matt and I have been kind of beating each other up and said, well, let's tell the truth to these guys.
Well, thank you.
You're under capacity. There is no SDC eligibility going on here, right?
Yeah.
So how are you gonna fix it? Well, what most communities do is they borrow money from the DEQ and they comprehensively plan to fix these things. And in your case, we ran out a case, and this is our case that seems to make the most comprehensive sense to us, is these basins that were clearly identified in the master plan is basin 4, 5, and 6. Basin 6 is probably your highest priority now, and that's the one where they were talking about there may be moratorium issues. So what we did is we went to the master plan and said, how much is the basin 6 improvements? How much is the basin 4? We added them together and we said, we're gonna borrow from the DEQ Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program immediately. And that number is about $10.2 million. And out of those projects, 450,000 we could use in the sewer SDC fund. That's the percent of all of those projects that are SDC eligible. So remember, we talked about just a little fraction is really growth, is capacity remaining. So the bottom line is we have to borrow about $9.7 million right away. And then we do the Basin 5 projects, which is another 4.6 million we do in 2 years. So you start taking on debt, and what's that nasty thing about debt? You gotta pay it back? Yeah, so that's the rate impact. So we did ran it through the rate model. And here's the bottom line, folks, and it's the right thing to do in my judgment, and you can take that for a grain of
That's the rate
salt.
model
Yeah,
we're talking now.
you're currently paying single family home about $46.95 a month for sewer right now. If we borrow the money for these two projects in the phases that we talked about, and we judiciously use cash reserves in the sewer fund to balance rate spikes, we would have to raise rates 8% per year, every year for the next 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, you'd go from $46.95 to about $68.90 a month. But we're gonna fix this problem, and we're gonna have the ability to serve growth. And then growth would then come in and pay SDCs when growth happens.
So we go from what, 30 to what?
$46.95 to $68.90 over 5 years. And
So after that 5 years,
after that 5 years, we're gonna continue to, that's the next hurdle you're gonna face. And I don't know what the hell that's gonna be, but it's gonna be expensive. Because your system is constantly aging. Remember, sewer systems are terribly corrosive environments for metals. You're basically putting acid, low strength acid through pipes. Not a good combination for any material that I'm aware of. So, Counselor, I tell you that, yeah, after that, we'll never raise rates again. I'd only be lying to you.
Sharon, this is basically fixing up the system we have. What's the alternative to put a whole damn new system in?
that's it.
You're still gonna have to borrow money, which would be cheaper in the long run,
It would be more expensive to put in a whole new system.
but in 20 years.
I mean, we might have to at some point. But if we're talking about putting in a whole new system, it would be a lot more expensive. As opposed to replacing something in place because you already have a blown out trench. So your rock X would be cheaper, I mean, it would be less, and so it would just be a lot cheaper to just.
The question stems from the redo our system now, presently would be using our present sewer plant to handle it. A whole new system, I could go some other place for my treatment plant.
I would use the same.
And one of the things I know from digging in the ground, there are sewer systems that predate the 1913 system in this area when they were put in privately.
I think trenching would break the bank. A whole new sewer system in terms of trenching and basalt. Oh my goodness.
Especially in this town.
Yeah.
Think
We
what
know
Coke-
that our water treatment facilities in good condition, so.
Big guess.
But what I think I hear Topaz saying is if, let's say we put a water or a treatment facility out towards the Moose Lodge area somewhere out in there in the future, then this upgrade actually is going, the flow's going the other way, unless you had two different treatment facilities.
Actually,
And that would be something too, a whole nother treatment facility to, if we could, on this side of the highway, start diverting some of that towards a new treatment facility, which is,
Sharon's being kind. You don't have a treatment problem.
no.
Your treatment system is just fine.
Yes.
It's your collection system that's got the kinks in it.
Time out. I don't think the last time our sewer system was permitted was 30 years ago. There've been new rules in the last 30 years.
Still operating under a current NPDES permit that's valid.
Keller just reported
It
to
may
us
not
that
be.
it's
Remember,
in good
we
condition.
had Art Lewinsky pointed out that there's some problems coming up with that. He's with the Army Corps.
He's talking about the lagoon.
No, he was talking about the sewer system, not the lagoon.
I've heard the lagoon from.
That's another
Part of
problem.
the collection.
That's another problem.
That has nothing to do with our permitting process. We are actually permitted.
Meet the standards.
What we wanted to
But
point out.
the issue is the collection system. I mean, you could put treatment plants all over, but if your pipes aren't adequate, to get it
You're
to
done.
flow there, it's gonna back up.
That's the
into-
front
into
door
the manholes,
problem.
into the streets, into people's backyards.
That's a front door problem, there's no question about that.
And the good news is, we can fix this. We can fix this and accommodate growth and serve the environment through not having surcharges. It's just gonna cost you 8% per month, going from $46.95 to $86.90.
And then
That's
you
the
said,
bad news that we're telling you.
right, and you said with the rate increase, though, the benefits would go into the SCCs. And how would people see the results of that?
Well, we would have growth come in, so your community would see growth.
I don't know if they're gonna like that. but-
I'm
just saying, I'm just being honest. Exactly.
And then we're gonna, we're gonna do the capital improvement projects, we're gonna fix the sewers.
And you're not gonna see sewage flowing on the streets at every 5-year storm event
Yeah.
at those choke points.
Street from my house. Yeah, so-
And I think that, you know, do you want number 2 on your streets?
In your backyard,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we've got some that backs
You
up.
can
into
sell this
people's
for us,
backyard.
okay?
At
I'm just gonna call you.
5-year storm event, you're seeing surcharging right now.
Okay, let's go to the event. Could the state come in and make us do something without us having to say yay, nay, or boo? Because we've got sewage flowing on the street, or is the Oregon law is so loose, they don't have any real authority?
Well, if you're Portland, you just keep paying a fine and pushing it out in the Willamette.
Yeah, I know.
We'll just get fined.
Yeah.
So that's a potential fee. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, I
Yeah.
mean,
That was a question. There are other ways they could come back at us if we don't fix them.
yeah.
That's,
The big pipe project, and it's been going on forever.
And let me talk about option 3, just to make sure
Yeah.
we don't digress too much. So option 3 is prohibiting or delaying development, and that is not easy. We assume that's not something that the council wants to do. And there's processes, justification, but that is something potentially out there.
Jacob is right. Other communities have done this. They said, we've got ours, close the gates, put up the concertina wire, nobody else is coming in. That's the strategy you would take.
and that includes industrial coming in.
Sure.
That
So
still
the
doesn't
whole,
fix our problem.
Yeah.
Still doesn't fix your
I don't
problem.
think you discriminate on that.
We're clear vision here.
Well, I'm-
Still doesn't fix the problem.
Fix the problem, so it's not really an option for this problem. It's not a
Think
solution.
of this really big can, and we're just kicking that can down the road with that strategy.
And just thinking about the future, and I know I just want to counsel this, and cause I'm not sure, and I'm asking Sharon and Jacob, if we were to take up here where our Ford Avenue, Kelly Street would be out, Millard Road, Edna Way. So Kelly Street would be roughly right in here, cause there's Childs Road. And we were to take a whole new line and come down Fertile, there's the high school right there. We were to take a whole new line and come down this, on this side of the Milton Creek or Gable Road down to our treatment facility. There, we go Railroad Avenue and go across the bridge if we had to. Just strap it to a bridge, put a whole new trunk line and take this whole Chad Davis development, which is up there above the church on Ross Road. And take all that, you could future growth Morton Lane, it goes clear out to there where we could project. Project that into SDCs, because it would be.
Why?
For demand.
Why are you reinventing the railroad here? You paid these guys a pile last fall to give you that. They gave you the answer to fix the problem.
Yeah.
They gave you the answer, and
What I'm looking at, Steve, is I'm not looking, you're looking at it through a small lens, you're kicking the can down the road. I'm not looking at it as that. I'm saying we do these other projects too.
This fixes the road.
Well, our future growth is out here. That's what they showed on there, is right here. What they showed on theirs is, that's our future growth right there, and that's why I'm saying a whole new trunk line through
Wouldn't
there.
growth pay for that then, as a condition of their approval?
That's what I'm asking.
That's the question.
That's what I'm saying, projecting the SDCs into that whole chunk of bare land here in R7 development. There's, you could go, Morton, how many acres you got?
I ain't telling.
No.
I ain't saying.
6 acres.
6 acres, okay, R7 gives you what, 3, about 4 4 per acre, Jacob? Right, with development roughly, so 4 times 7 is 28, so you figure that into the SDC's projected. Not projected.
No, I would do it,
Pay for
I
that.
would do it completely differently. I would say, anybody who's gonna develop in that area is gonna have to pay for the whole line, period. They're gonna,
That's
it
what I'm
only
saying.
serves them, so there's no SDC
That's
at
what
all.
I'm saying.
It is a fee that they will pay into a fund.
So,
And Jacob can set up a fund for just that.
so not
We
only
should-
this Morton, but anybody
Is that-
else who has acreage out there who's not a R10 or smaller.
Those that are being served are paying for it.
As a development.
That happens all the time there.
So
Now, I believe that when Keller and Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when we looked at the upsizing of the lines, we looked at the whole UGB, right? Connecting to it, and so the upsize would take into account those.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back, and forgive me, Mayor, but that doesn't fix the existing issue.
That's what I was
No,
thinking.
it doesn't, because of Elk
Doesn't fit.
Ridge and a few others. But I'm looking, I'm on, we're gonna be here.
Sure.
Somebody's gonna be cussing us out saying our predecessors did not do any future planning.
That dumb mayor.
Yeah. I mean, if you had a huge line coming from, basically, let's just say, Bings out to the fairgrounds, and you had a big trunk line coming down on right past the dollar store, going through Gable Road, actually cut into Walmart's parking lot, just come along the edge there. Say, intimate domain, I guess, I don't know, I hate using that word, but to get it to come through there.
I don't even know if Gable Road could handle it, because she was talking about Gable Road's not too far down the
No,
line
Gable-
from.
Gable doesn't have our sewer, it's on the back side. It comes down Sykes, right down the middle, it's not on this side of Gable. Gable has no continuous sewer through it, correct?
It does,
All the way
Gable-
through,
yeah, from,
it goes underneath the track?
yeah, so Gable Road comes from where Gable and Columbia intersect, and it goes under the highway and runs along the track and down Port Avenue.
No, it does not come down, it's right here.
So you're talking
I'm
about,
talking right here, look. Come right
yeah,
here.
no, there's no sewer line down there.
Walmart parking lot, right here, a whole new trunk line going just like this.
That Gable Road line was actually one of the alternatives we looked at, part of the master plan. I remember
Yeah.
specifically talking to Emily and working through that. Upstream of that, there might be a solution that has some merit there for future development that they would,
Yes.
future development would pay for, but
That's what I'm trying.
it just doesn't solve the
I'm not
existing.
talking about that, I'm sorry to get diverted a little bit off topic.
Doesn't fix your problem.
but that can still be done though.
I
You see what I'm
appreciate, yeah,
saying?
I
Yeah.
appreciate the foresight that you're having.
You
So
there.
you're
said-
talking about a whole new
that-
trunk line to
Yeah.
serve, yeah.
Because also that one neighborhood right here, if you were to take Chad Davis's development off, you know where that's at, right? Don Danielson,
Yep.
Chad Davis. If you were to take that completely off the system and add it to a whole new trunk line, you've alleviated Sykes Road. Especially that development. You take one and trade another one. Correct? The Comstock is equal to Chad Davis about,
It's about the
and if
same.
you took it off,
Well, there's still,
so.
I mean, damage done to these
Oh,
that
yeah,
have to
no,
be
no,
repaired.
there's some major repairs.
Right,
$10
so,
million,
15 million.
yeah, total, the two.
The two together is 10 and then another 5 after that. And the good news is there's financing available for that, the DEQ Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program, which you've partaken of in the past, has options for that. You gotta pay it back. And 20-year loans.
Interest rate though.
What have we used it for in the past?
For the influent infiltration, that's sewer rehab.
That has been paid off.
No.
It's like, okay, looks like we need to talk about debt a little
It
bit
was
more.
Part
Yeah,
of it was refinanced.
last year we refinanced a good portion of it. There's one loan remaining from DEQ that's no interest, so we didn't refinance that one. Since we're not paying any interest, that's like 50 grand a year. But the other ones were refinanced when we did the Selling Nickel bond. We paid off the I&I projects, the water projects, the street fund LED projects. So it was kind of a mishmash of other debt services all combined into one. So No, technically, it's not paid off.
We're eating into your time here. I know it's 3 o'clock. You're gonna break. You heard us today. You heard us. SDCs are going up. Saying
Anything else you wanted to?
sewer's gonna take 8% per year if you're gonna do this the right way.
I just wanted to make sure that one of the reasons why we brought this up is to get direction from the council as to allowing development to continue to connect, knowing that this is the issue with our sewer, because that was one of the issues that came up, especially with the Comstock one, and where do we go from here?
So these gentlemen behind us who did this, actually the caution is in the major event that there could be a overflow issue. Under semi-normal or even a little extreme conditions, it holds up.
So under we model the 5-year, 24-hour storm event, which is for a wastewater system. We identified the places that we would predict in that event that they would overflow. And that's what DEQ requires you to convey with your collection system is a 5-year, 24-hour event. And what we're showing here, it does not convey that.
But we would not hear from DEQ unless we had a catastrophic event. And then we could just bolt down the hatches. On the
Well, that's one solution.
You could.
I'm out.
It doesn't do that.
It sounds like to me that, I
On
mean,
a planet Shoal, you could do that.
common sense, Sharon, would dictate that we should halt until we've made a decision about how we're gonna handle this problem. Is that, I mean,
No development ever?
I mean, maybe until we have
You wanna
talked
talk about
about.
a meeting, you wanna talk about a meeting? that
Oh,
we
yeah.
have here?
Could
I'm
talk about some
concerned that
pitchforks.
That is very
Maybe something
dangerous ground.
planning commission.
And that's a whole, and that's a process.
Right.
You can't just make a motion tonight and say, snap your fingers, it's done. Advance notice to the state,
Here's what I
justification,
think.
public hearing.
Here's what I think is sitting here is my thought is that we are aware of a problem. We have a funding mechanism. We have staff who've been working diligently on. Let's continue to be cautious, but maybe even in lieu of fees in place on future developments, which doesn't stop it.
Right.
But it gives them the option if they want to pay the in lieu of until, the city's got some stuff that we have to work out. It's not. The other thing that anybody here did, 1989 probably was a transition of mayors too, I'm thinking about, because Randy was there for 14 years. 1989. 1989.
So
And 4th Street was identified in that one. That's where we have to start, is on 4th Street.
Mayor, if I could ask a follow-up question, when you're talking about doing the in lieu of fee, that would mean we don't move forward with the debt service plan that Steve talked about.
Well, I thought we could do both. I thought he said we could do,
You could do
You
both.
can't do both.
You can do both.
that's what we were talking
Those
about.
are some heavy decisions for you folks to make here. You've got a plan, thank goodness you've got a master plan that says what the problem is. So now you know how big the bread box is.
You guys wasted no time, right? Master plan, make this decision.
And we get it. I mean, we're just the chicks here and we're looking to you to feed us, give us answers. So right
I
now,
understand that we'll just move forward. But cautiously understanding that we are gonna be funding this in
Yeah,
different avenues.
we definitely want, just looking at this, direct staff to also look at where maybe even 4th Street could come down part of, that's like Columbia Boulevard all the way down to the corner here and then shoot it down. Part of it, maybe
still
more.
have to borrow to do that.
I know, yes.
We still have to
But
borrow.
we
for that.
are gonna be here doing this anyhow.
Yeah,
We're doing
when
that
that
whole
goes through our-
intersection,
Right.
we're doing that whole intersection, and we're redoing this whole street down here, so.
The real solution here is.
Fourth Street sewer is very large, I would probably not recommend taking it down through here.
Yeah, no, not taking it out, just taking some of this and adding.
Oh, you talking about from the
Too.
Second Street, okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, but we're in a process of a riverfront development,
Yeah.
and that's all.
All this
That
ties
if
into it
we're
too.
smart, we would tie all of this into that
Of course.
while we're doing it, while we're trenched. And it seems to me, I'm zeroing in on 4th Street, 2nd Street in Sector 5. It looks like everything is gravity fed to where we want it. There is a pump station, I know, on 2nd Street or 1st Street that takes the refuse up Cowlitz. Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
That's
because
gonna move with the new.
everything could be down gravity fed down our riverfront development and right to WWTP, our wastewater treatment plant. And to me, it's just like, whoa, it's there. So it's all going to be done. And I'm just kind of thinking, okay, integration. And so that's for.
So I want to bring up to the council, because I know staff's got a call from Comstock about the sale of their property that we actually annexed in. We annexed in, and they found out that they could not do development until actually we as a city said that we're gonna have to continue to allow growth. So we have to make some decisions on that. You guys have talked to her.
Yeah, and we can't just, like I said, there's a whole process to shut off the development process.
Yes.
I think tonight, it would be good as part of your work session action items to assemble the general guidance that you've discussed. That way it's clear.
Yes.
I have one more thing that I just want to throw this in there while I'm thinking about it. Where does the relief funds that we're receiving from the government fall? Have we allocated any of this money for any of the street stormwater projects?
You have allocated $400,000 for water and sewer infrastructure.
Okay.
However, that infrastructure is intended for the industrial business park.
As your ARPA fund?
Yeah, all the other ARPA funds have been allocated to other projects.
So the
Is there
takeaway-
additional federal money in the queue?
There is the Infrastructure Act that was just passed. The money that's going to be allocated to water and sewer is going to be allocated to the states through their for the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. And it's going to be according to what the rules have not been promulgated yet, but according to everything we're hearing from Washington, is it will be predicated on the most needy get the money first based on median household income. So with your median household income, you may be in a good position, and it'll probably be modeled on what he was talking about here was the RRA era, where you borrow $1, you forgive 50 cents, and the 50-cent balance is at 0 interest. Those rules have not been promulgated, but they are going to be rolling down through the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program. So I don't want to blow kisses at you. There is an opportunity for that money to be available for people in need first.
And that's also going to be a process.
Oh.
Because it's run by the government, and there's going to be hoops to jump through, letters to write, campaigns to do.
Something we can't count on, but we can we're at the table to roll the dice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're in a pretty good position. John, what's the median household income here? Do you remember?
It's low.
It's not as low as.
It's actually,
Gone up quite a bit,
it's
yeah.
not considered low income, and with all the residents moving out here from Portland and their incomes, it's actually shot up where actually dequalified us from some
The
USDA.
state average, last I saw, was $56,000 median household income. I think you're above that. I think you're in the 60s or 70s. Jacob?
I believe so, yeah.
So that would imply that you're gonna go down in the queue.
Yeah.
Sorry, Doug.
Interesting question though, can you take the city section by section and focus on a section? You have to take the entire
I've
city
tried that.
system.
I've tried that with the community development block grants, and they're very effuse to gaming. They don't like to be gamed. So we can't do that. I'll tell you that right now.
Just a thought.
Jesus, digging. Well, look at the couch cushions too.
found a nickel. I got $1. Got $1.
Okay, we're gonna get out of your hair. I think we're gonna need some better guidance on this fee in lieu of concept of what you're talking about.
Well, because I think that needs to happen because we have already some growth going and we could start that in, we could almost adopt that separate from SDCs.
I don't know. You might want to get some legal advice, get some John advice on that.
I'm asking you because you're.
I've seen it, but usually when you start telling a developer you gotta pay a fee that nobody else has to pay, the first thing he says is meet my lawyer.
Okay,
So the second thing is
and just to really,
get good guidance for these guys, because these developers are gonna be barking at them here. They're in construction season. These guys are setting up for their loans, and with interest rates going up, they want to lock in their development loans now. So they're gonna
So-
be getting more pressure.
so the particular developments that are going on are not gonna be both pulling a building permit within at least 9 months. Takes that long to develop.
That was a very important term.
Yeah.
Remember, Steve mentioned tying that fee to a land use decision.
Yeah.
It's not a building permit.
Right.
Right.
That's
So-
before the building.
So it's not gonna capture everything.
Yes,
It's only gonna capture those bigger items.
yes.
So it's imperfect in that regard.
It
Absolutely.
is imperfect in that regard. Yes, absolutely.
Mayor, what we're telling you is the backstop for all of this, what we're talking about here, even your riverfront, is gonna be the ratepayer.
Yeah.
Regardless of how we get the balls in the air and when growth pays for SDCs.
Yeah.
We start moving downfield on this thing, it's gonna be rates that are gonna have to be the backstop.
I mean, and you just brought up the sewer part of it and not the
Oh.
storm part of it.
Right, and
So, I mean, you're talking 5 years, $20 bill on the sewer,
yeah, sewer's a problem, stormwater, I mean,
right? Over 5 years, it was $20 difference.
yeah,
That was 40.
40?
goes from 40, goes from 49 to 68, yeah,
86, right?
68, okay.
Yeah.
Stormwater's in trouble. Your stormwater
And our storm is,
is big trouble. I mean, his modeling, he models it in the sense that when are we gonna go broke?
so it'll
And
go from
you're-
$12 to $36, pretty much. $20 bill there too.
With the master plan projects that are identified in the CIP, the rates will not cut it. I think Steve and I have been working on some modeling over the last few weeks, and John and Jacob and Mohammed have been involved in that. And right now, we're modeling a situation where you borrow about $10 million for some of the storm projects that are identified. And your rates of storm over 5 years, I think end up going from about $12 right now to, I think, about 40
40
42
and
or something
change,
like
yeah.
that.
We know that's
And
untenable.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not gonna
We know
propose that,
that's
so it's working with the model and all the expenses.
You
that
are
go in.
smart folks and you're gonna have to prioritize on this. And we think sewer right now is your biggest problem. That's why
I'm
we're
just thinking
here.
about it as a whole. I don't wanna be more than $10 a year as far as increases on the whole entire thing. You know, which is 50 in the 5 years, and that's not meeting your demand, but that's just kind of a good number people can wrap their head around. And that's just, you know, it's not the top mark, what's recommended by the experts.
Shoot the expert.
And we're not even including, some of the annual maintenance stuff that is proposed and discussed in the master plan of $800,000 a year for storm and $1 million for sewer and 800 or 900 some odd for water.
But
It's not even getting close
It
to
has to be as simple as you guys can get it for us to present it to the community. It has to be something that's not, this, all
I
right,
hear you.
$10 every year, okay, or $12 every year.
And here's what you
And
get.
And
This
it's
is what
$60
you're
over
gonna
5,
get.
it's 12 a year, and
Specifically.
it's 60 and.
You brought up a
5 years,
great point. Public Works, it's all underground. Nobody sees it. We're saying, we're gonna do these sewer projects. Okay, so now I can't drive on my street because you're digging up my darn street.
So
How
we
can you
made a
help
good
me?
point about no one wants the sewers overflowing when
Yeah.
we've had a bad rainstorm. Those are things that we can visually explain to
Yeah.
people that they'll understand what's happening under.
You don't wanna live in a world of bleak.
So there we go. See?
So there you
We're gonna
go.
have you make commercials and everything.
All right, well, I think this is a good place to actually take our break. 10 minute, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the vacation of right of way for the public safety facility.
We're gonna come back to you next month in a work session on the rates, so we're gonna kick this horse again, okay?
Yep, we're looking forward to it.
let's welcome back from our recess here. Welcome back from our recess here, and time is 3:31 p.m. and we'll go to our next item on the agenda. And I want to remind council that we do have an executive session. So we have a 6 o'clock tonight. Original. So discussion to initiate vacation of right of way by motion related to the public safety facility.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'm gonna do you a favor. We've had some heavy topics today, and I know you have looked at the public safety facility site and have lamented
Yes.
about this 7th Street on the paper.
Yes.
And now is your chance to get rid of it.
Let's get rid of it.
You have the power to get rid of it. It's time for revenge.
Yes.
All right, so we've been talking about this site for some time. And as it's evolved, we realized that we want or need to push the facility into the 7th Street right of way and a little bit to the other property. So we need to vacate it. And normally what we're used to, it was a good thing last time we had a vacation discussion, so there's kind of a primer. And the normal process is someone wants to vacate, they get a bunch of consent forms from property owners, and there's that whole process. For the government to do it, we could do it by motion instead of the petition and consent. It's still a public hearing, still a process, but that's the way the government can do it. So on this memo, there is a very specific motion that I hope is made tonight and seconded and passed. With that motion, we can proceed with the right-of-way vacation process for the areas highlighted there. And that's another little mini step for the public safety facility. If you recall, we got rid of some easements that were unnecessary. That was the first baby step. This is number 2, more of a toddler step. So it's that simple. We don't need it. The great thing is because it's been so thoroughly surveyed, we don't have to guess about what kind of easements we need to reserve. We'll have to work with PGE. They have some lines in there. So basically, I just wanted to prime you on that. This memo has the specific language to be used. That's very important. I just want to make sure this is a bulletproof process. And so having that motion will let us proceed, and we'll have a public hearing, at some future meeting.
Month and a half from now.
So it's public property to public property.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. In the memo, I mentioned this is a public project. It's surrounded by public property. It's all about public. This form of street vacation, it would be inappropriate, Joe Bob, hey, why don't you do this for me? That would be kind of weird. But for a project like this, very much appropriate. So I'm just hoping for that motion tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, for mayor student contest entries. Do you want to, do you have them for power? Bring them up. And I know we've all voted, and we're not gonna, actually, I have the results here, but they will not be announced till later tonight. Perfect. Yeah.
And I recused myself from the rate vote initially because one of my students, but then I was to help with the tiebreaker, so.
Good. Yeah,
So we've all reviewed them.
well,
We've all.
yeah, yes, and
We voted.
yeah, and I just wanted to actually give a chance just to go through them,
Okay.
here. I love that, a lot of them were being healthier, and discussion on animals too. They love their animals too. I really love these posters for the 4th and 5th graders.
Hospital.
Yep. I absolutely love the artwork too.
Yeah,
Look
that
at
was great. The
Yes.
free store,
Yep.
community gardens, really great ideas.
Yep.
All extremely good topics, didn't they touch on?
Yeah.
Across the board, health issues and, all quality of life issues, everything.
Then we'll go into the essays here. I really like this first one because it was talking about actually current stuff that had happened in his neighborhood.
Yeah, law enforcement and
His
crime.
or her, and I'm not sure. This one it really just kept me following too. I love the way that they, okay, let's talk trash. Safety in our community, we the people, yeah. Hey, Doc, they hit on a number of issues. I really like this one. This format. Yeah. This one was very well written as well. The community garden, and how the pandemic and how we really could have used it at that point in time. So now let's go ahead and just play these. They're only a couple minutes long each. It is.
Hello, I'm Hayden Strapp. I'm in 10th grade and this is my digital media presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, I'm Hayden Strapp. I'm in 10th grade and this is my digital media presentation for the If I Were Mayor contest. My first topic is community health in St. Helens. As the global health crisis wanes, it is easier for people to get jobs and have an improved social life. I think that people should support proper etiquette in preventing the community from becoming ill. This etiquette can be simplistic, such as washing your hands regularly, or substantial, such as staying home if signs of contagious illness are present. If I were mayor, I would promote the health of citizens through these basic guidelines. My second topic is improving citizens' health. One thing that needs improvement is the health of our citizens. Only 3% of people follow the healthy living guidelines of not smoking, eating right, exercising, and keeping a low body fat percentage. These are the lowest the rates have been in years. The numbers will keep declining if nothing is done to promote increased health in all people. If I were mayor, I would work to restore our parks and promote outdoor walking to all citizens. I would also look into our own McCormick Park, specifically to clean and restore its workout trail, an easy way to make outdoor activities a daily occurrence to the average citizen. My third topic is helping the poor and underprivileged. One of the most substantial political problems in Oregon is the plethora of houseless, underprivileged, and unstable people whose problems need our attention. Additionally, many people need jobs to live healthy, productive lives. Firstly, access to medical and psychiatric care are necessary for sickly persons and mentally unstable people. The jobless and houseless need more financial stability to help them get through life. As the mayor, I would work with mental health organizations to help severe cases of mental illness in accessing care. In addition, I would promote the construction of housing for persons who cannot afford increasingly expensive housing. The topic is improving our education system. The education system in Oregon has lesser quality than the majority of the United States. St. Helens High School currently has an 87% graduation rate. However, U.S. News ranks St. Helens High School as number 124 in the state. Disabled persons need an education specific to their needs. Most adults do not participate in many educational activities such as reading, studying, and extracurricular activities. If I were mayor, I would work with local libraries to encourage children and adults to read more books. I would also work with the school district to tailor each special needs student's curriculum and education to better suit their needs and abilities. My final topic is taking care of the environment. Since the pandemic, the environment has improved since factories have been emitting less toxic waste chemicals. Not only does air pollution cause a problem, pollution is produced by littering, mistreatment of garbage, and ignorance in recycling as an option. Providing recycling education and recycling options in all St. Helens parks would help decrease littering and pollution. If I were mayor, I would promote the recycling of as many materials as possible, and in addition, clean the city's parks and other outdoor areas susceptible to the onslaught of pollution. Thanks for watching.
Great. Then we'll go to the next one.
Calvin, he was changing the slides.
You can hear him click that.
Hello, and this is my presentation for February 2020. The main thing that I focused on for my presentation was helping the community get together more and help each other starting with financially struggling people. I would think it would be great to help start farms and gardens in the community for the food bank, so people can learn how to grow their own food and raise their own animals and lots of things like that. Food bank, garden, and farm would help people who don't have a lot of money for food so they can go and get food. And it would also bring opportunities for people to learn how to grow fruits and vegetables in our climate and how to raise animals and what types of foods are good. Low cost living environments. Building homes that are cheap and roomy for short-term use, I believe would help the community because it would keep people who have just been in a tragedy like a fire, we keep them in the community while they're getting back on their feet. Helping people find jobs in the community locally, I think is really important, especially for small businesses that are struggling, especially with COVID. Small businesses help the town's culture and help boost small stuff. I believe that all of these things are important to work on. And thank you for listening.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go on to our city administrator report, John Walsh.
All right, thank you, Mayor. That was certainly a lot more delightful than talking about the city's infrastructure deficiencies and all the challenges we're facing with not only growth, but our just existing maintenance. So on the evening agenda tonight, I'm starting off with fire and water. We had the fireworks contract was added to the agenda. That's something that's usually it's by now, and I just got it on Friday. So we had so it's $20,000 show for the last few years. Last contract had a multi-year contract in it. It's just a one-year thing, so we'll be doing this again next year. In your box or packet, we have a request for a leak adjustment. And the adjustment is a Kyle Cooper report. And apparently this is the current policy is that administratively, city staff, we can adjust up to half the overage, and anything more than 50% goes to so if they want to push that further. This is a pretty significant leak, about $2,800, $27.56.33. Water bill, and we're requesting an adjustment over 2 periods. So because it was a sustained leak, and they went and they did the repairs and got all the permits and got everything inspected and approved, it's all good. But they're requesting average bill that they would normally do in that period of time, which is in the 650 cubic residential kind of usage. be applied to both those months. So we don't actually have the amounts for both the months yet. So the ask here is to just make them the average amounts.
How was this leak discovered? Did we alert them to the meter read, or was there water blowing out the sidewalk?
I don't have that background, but we do typically have alarms that go off at high usage.
Yeah.
City.
That's definitely a big leak.
That's city staff notes.
Yes, okay, so I don't know if that was by software or by drive-by or.
It's really an odd one because it happened in the coupling and that's not where they're supposed to break. You know? Yeah. So it's a defect in the coupling itself.
So this would be taken forward to the evening session for work session. Action item. A little bit more about that. This happens occasionally, and you get the opportunity to make those adjustments. And you impose that upon yourself. You could have it as a policy revision, just say that staff has the authority to make those adjustments to the average billing if you wanted to do that, and probably limit it to 1 or 2 times a year. Side words on it. That's something you want to bring that notion forward, or if you like the way it is. I don't have a preference one way or the other, but we're talking about it now, and it would normally wouldn't be if we had a policy that allowed it to be handled administratively.
Okay, if I just let the council know that the gentleman that we allowed to have a basically to get his taxes back, he did pay his water bill in full. So just wanted to, we all made a decision on that.
Seen him at Safeway recently, so.
Yeah, he did. So it was, I followed up and he paid it before March 31st. Yep. $1,800 in full.
Yeah. Any discussion on that? You want to keep the policy the way it is? You guys maybe one by one, or okay. Sometimes things get to be kind of nuisance-y kinds of things that you don't want to deal with anymore, and then we'll make those changes and kind of identify the opportunities when they present themselves. Exciting news with the RFQ for master developer recruitment, closed date on Friday. We got 2 proposals back, both from really well qualified firms that have done projects that you know. It's really exciting. So we're trying to come up with next steps with that recruitment. Both scheduling presentations from the developers to come in and talk to us and present, forming an evaluation committee that would be representative of the people you want to be as part of that decision. Ultimately, it comes back to the council regardless. But we did at staff level frame up a draft, working out the developers to come up with some dates that they can make with their schedules. And May 11th, which is an off Wednesday, looks like it's a day that might work fairly well. All interviews, presentations, we can talk about the qualifications and visions for the waterfront. Ask of them and bring both of them in. They'd be recorded, and we would have those for either this evaluation committee to review at the meeting, or if they wanted to just couldn't make the meeting, and they can certainly watch the presentation. So the draft committee members was all of the council, representatives of the planning commission, citizen at large, and then staff, not all staff, but just myself, Jenny Demshone, Mohammed, and Sharon. And this follows the format that we've used in the past with other related things putting out there.
Basically, we'd ask questions get a presentation, ask questions of 2 different qualified, or if we feel they're qualified or not, we make that decision.
And the public would be invited to this meeting, would they be allowed, or how are we?
I wouldn't, it would be a special meeting, so you wouldn't have to allow the public to comment. It would be more of a presentation, usually, more of an interview. And really, that's a good point, because this is, April 1st was our initial deadline, and we got two, what I consider really good proposals. That doesn't mean we can't say, no, we're gonna send the deadline and wait a couple more weeks to see if anybody wants to submit. They're the only two that have been actively working with us through the recruitment periods. I don't know that there's extending would add a lot of value to that.
Okay.
Or you can interview these two and then make that decision.
I have an appointment in Portland, a doctor, it's an important doctor's appointment at 11:30. It shouldn't take more than a half hour, so I should be back here, but it might be a little late.
On the 11th. The 18th is also a day that we're trying to work to do.
18th, our council meeting day.
Yes.
Sacred. That is sacred for.
Are you seeking direction?
This is open for your feedback on all of it, frankly.
FYI,
You're the one selecting them, so we're trying to queue this up and have a good process and come up with a committee that's representative of boards of commission, so they feel like they're part of the process. And,
Yeah, so we had the two, you want to tell them who the two are?
I'm sure they can.
Yeah.
Surprise
Yeah.
us.
It's Atkins Dame is one of them, and then RKM, which is Roy Kim Development. They're both very well-respected developers in Portland.
And we'll see their portfolios, I'm guessing.
The
extensively, so.
proposals will go out to you electronically. We have 5 digital or paper copies. Share as well.
Yeah, we want to Dun & Bradstreet on these people to see what their financial condition is.
Part of the RFQ was to submit a statement to that effect. Not necessary, Dun & Bradstreet, but it's
a model, so to speak.
Once we select somebody, we can do our own, or if we have a finalist, we can do our own.
Okay, I just wondered if that was part of it.
I think it's important to have public, first of all, see it and also have an opportunity to comment. Maybe not in particular situation like that day, but I think it's important to have public involvement in this.
Yeah, that's the reason for having the meeting, to record it
Yeah.
publicly so that it's available for people to.
Sure. I totally agree, and I would not stray too far away from what we have right there.
Right, I'm just talking about
Yes.
people's comments about the developers and, you know.
I
think
like
that's
that,
important to
I
hear
like that idea as well. Sometimes it gets a little off base and we get hooked into deliberating with whoever it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes those can be really lengthy, especially when the room is full of an audience. I would like to see us with stringent timelines and not deliberate.
But
Listen, take that information in and deliberate amongst ourselves in an action.
Well, I think that this committee, I think we should actually meet with, like what's being proposed, is meet with this committee and then see if we wanna, if there's interest from that committee, maybe it's not. Maybe they're like, well, I don't like that at all, or there's some serious red flags that come up.
Well, I like
Maybe
that.
and then once that is approved, we're talking 3 planning commissioners, Russ, Steve, Jennifer, Al, Peterson. I mean, there's right there is a representation of us as voters here to represent the citizens, to kind of do that initial step process.
I think that's essential. What I was alluding to was the opening up the gallery back here just to any kind of deliberation.
But I think we should definitely, it's gonna be recorded.
We need to hear it.
There'll be recorded meetings. I think we definitely need to deliberate.
Well, after you get the, we'll say the hard meeting done, then you open it up so the public can do whatever. But by that time, we have a good idea what our opinion is gonna be.
Exactly.
But if you don't have it, we get home. We don't have a public meeting, we're gonna get home, kids.
There's no question.
Without a doubt.
I think was the question though too, some kind of formal or informal, we're gonna ask people to fill out a survey or open it up and say, send us your send specific comments to John or to whatever, so that when we come back on the 18th too, or whatever, we would see how people have responded, what their particular questions are. Was that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah,
In
I
addition
think,
to
I
just
think it's
not being-
important, and I understand, we are the elected officials, but I think it's important to open that door and say, hey, we're listening to you guys and we're reading what you're saying, but we're still gonna make.
Sure.
But I do think it's important to have, that opportunity for some feedback.
I just don't want people misunderstanding without having the ability to ask questions and writing down information based on what they see on a little booklet from Broken or the Acton Dam
Yeah.
electronically. So that's
Yeah.
kind of scary.
Yeah, or maybe we even have a little.
Versus when you have planning commissioners and you have our city planner, community development project manager, JD, our city administrator, public works, engineering, citizen at large, who's also an architect, Al Peterson, 3 different planning commissioners, and us. Council, I think it's pretty good representation. I just throw that out.
Yeah, I think, I don't want it to be too unwieldy, so we're not making it 20, but I mean, it's already we got 13 on there. And if another 1 or 2 citizens at large.
Maybe a Parks Commission, who's Parks Commission chair, or who would be somebody that you would recommend?
Well, off the cuff,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any to recommend.
How about
I
Stockwell?
could go to our neighborhood.
Yeah, and Scott Stockwell would be a bad one. Maybe a planning commission, Parks Commissioner, and if it is parks.
Yeah, that's true.
Riverwalk.
I would go with Carmen.
And everything else.
Okay, so maybe Carmen Dunn and Scott Stockwell. If Scott has the ability to, he should. He's excited about it.
Scott or school board member.
Yeah.
The school board in Stockwell with their building they've been doing, they ought to be asking good
Yeah,
questions.
we could ask the
About
chair,
energy.
the school board
I
chair.
would go with Scott.
Throw it to the board and let their board decide, and invite their board to appoint Scott or one of them.
I like the idea of, involving more of the community and,
I think
Works
15
in
would
here.
be, is
Star River
a
Front.
couple more, yeah.
Yeah.
15, you start getting more than that, that's a big discussion.
Yeah, I don't think it should be a free for all. That's not at all what I'm advocating for. I'm just, hoping that if there are people that are really wanting to comment on,
Usually the comment comes in stronger at the vision and the proposals that they share. Not just that, well, we're
Sure.
selecting a qualified party right
Yeah.
here. This isn't gonna be the last opportunity to engage with the public on this at all. And reflecting back on
We're
our
gonna be
our
married to
discussions
this,
with
this, we'll be married to whoever, if we decide to pick one, we'll be married to them for like a year and a half.
we gotta invite everybody to
that's
the
why
wedding,
I
is what
wanna-
I'm saying. Speak now or forever hold your peace, right?
Maybe longer, maybe longer,
It will be several
Yeah.
years, yes.
yeah.
But yeah, these types of lists usually don't get shorter. That's why we kind of propose a succinct list. If you're gonna add people, that's great. Or process.
On that idea, the reason that I kind of came back and I go, well, that's a good idea. So, we listen and we'll get into a point of where we start deliberating and get into a crunch. And the reason that I'm saying that is that when we went through this one process, one of the individuals who thought she was being infringed on in terms of height restrictions paid a boatload of children, to create signs. They called the Oregonian, they called K2, they called everyone, and they filled this council chambers with signs and banners. And it was all about height restrictions. And it affected the whole development. It kind of set it back in some senses. The planning commission had to hear it. And then they came up with an idea, and that split the planning commission. I know that it caused a lot of friction. But now we have a height restriction, and it's still a controversy in with builders and with some citizens with the height restriction. Are we going to go up higher than what's there? How do we do that? What's going on with all of that? So that's the reason that I brought that up, because it can really kind of, a lot of things can kind of go sideways at this point.
And that does make sense. That makes sense to me.
All that process. There's a south waterfront, 300-foot skyscrapers.
Exactly.
No, that wasn't the one.
Exciting news, though. Very
It's
exciting.
great, it's good to have any. For the first time we did it, we didn't get any back in 2017 until afterwards, and we started engaging with Tocola. And even then, Tocola
His report.
wanted to do the hotel and do the mixed use building, and but not the whole project. That was just more than they wanted to take on. This is taking on the whole thing. So that's-
Okay. I'm excited to hear from you.
So, all right, moving on from this issue. So we'll extend the invitation on the selection committee, try to stick to May 11th, or if that works, maybe going well past 1 o'clock, maybe starting at 2.
Yeah,
That helps anybody?
it would help me. I may, let's see, 8:12. I'll put in for a substitute today. So I actually want to, it wouldn't make any difference, because my substitute would get at 12 o'clock. So if I go from 8 to 12, it wouldn't make any difference.
We could do 4 or 6, or I mean, that was just trying to accommodate your schedule, so.
4 or 6 works better,
That works.
but
Probably helps.
I can.
I'm available for that time, so it's whatever
And
everyone
that's
else
the one,
is.
that's one thing we knew about that, so.
Right.
that
You
they-
knew I was available.
Yeah, just kind of building up what we knew,
Yeah.
other people I know have schedules.
Well, I wanna
It work
be-
better
yeah.
for other people too.
So it might be, yeah, later is better for me, but I can work
On the 18th.
one sooner.
11th.
Which helps
On
you out with
the
your,
11th.
yeah,
okay.
which helps you out with your,
Oh, yeah.
then you wouldn't be just a little bit late.
Yeah, they give you wouldn't have to rush them.
It, you know, really, just you're hearing those presentations that are recorded, so if you couldn't make it, you could always go back and watch it, so.
It's 4 hours
Yes,
total.
but-
So if we start at 4, we're not
Well,
done.
the
till
thought was
8.
do an hour and a half and then a break, and then an hour and a half.
So like 9, we'd be done
For us, raise their hand.
for the day, if we start at 4.
There's a John, it's John's report. It's 7.
Who did?
8-ish.
Can I just add the school board, they meet that night, so you wouldn't be able to get anyone from the board or Scott.
They could still review.
Oh, yeah, they just couldn't be here.
More people you add, try to get a time and date that works for everybody is more and more challenging.
Yeah.
This virtual world gives us some tools to address that. That's work around. Thank you, Lisa. I'm on the public safety facility. We're moving. Lots of good progress on the design there. You're gonna see that again here fairly soon. The infrastructure, the fill and grade portion of that, the site that we need to raise up a little bit to meet the standards is on a path towards permitting. We're gonna handle that in-house. We've done a design for the source of material on the site. We're gonna take some of the material on site, crush it on site, and save the project $200,000 just to start off with. So that'll be a self-performed some wind, and hopefully we'll keep along with the project timeline real nicely here. Then on Riverwalk, the Columbia View Park redesign, the street projects are all, all aspects of the design, the funding and the construction are just moving along nicely. It was a little bit, a couple months delayed on the Columbia View Park redesign, but it was worth it, I think. So we wanted to get both those projects up to the same point of going from 30 to 60 to 90% design. And that's happening. It's good. You'll see that fairly soon.
This is kind of an interesting thing with the parks in their starting their involvement with their master plan, and now planning for the expansion of the Columbia View Park. Interesting how that could dovetail. I'm going to keep the lines of communication open to the Parks Department. So if they start coming up with ideas that don't dovetail with our consultants are telling us, and those kinds of things, that it could cause maybe some friction, but just.
So I don't disagree. They've seen the initial, essentially what we're looking at is the change in the scope of work of the park, where the box around the playground, existing play equipment right there, is going to no longer be a box. That play equipment will come out and replaced with something that's more suitable for that space, and move towards Cowlitz in kind of a kidney bean kind of a shape. And the Parks Commission will see those renderings as they are.
Yeah, as soon as those kind of concepts come forward, we'd like to pass them on to the Parks Commission so that they have an idea with it.
Is the master plan for parks complete? Have we received it?
Is it complete? Oh, my heavens, no. Everyone's kind of like, just kind of like brainstorming right now of what each park needs. So if you went to weigh in on one of those meetings, they're taking each park at a time. I'll let you know when Campbell Park is coming up and whatever. And that was going to be part of my report tonight. Cool.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal that. I was just
No,
curious.
no,
if you brought that
it's
up.
really a good thing. It's a good reminder. Thank you.
So moving on my report here, the auditors are wrapping up the events audit. We also have a draft contract back as of yesterday morning, which I didn't get in time for this meeting, but
Well, you got it.
I do have something back. We're calling it an independent contractor agreement, which kind of clearly defines the roles and responsibilities of how the cash flows. And the audit seems really. I don't have any red flags reading the draft audit, but we're there's just things on both sides of the city, and it just really underscores why we shouldn't be in this business.
Right.
There's so many little pieces that and we should have a final report of the draft and of the audit and contract by the next meeting for sure. So, we're working to relight the Central Waterfront project, and with the money that's coming out of this state legislature and the feds to FEMA to do some more work on the lagoon project. And that will most certainly have a public engagement piece of it as an advisory committee, and Rachel's working on putting that together.
Can you put some space between that and the rates meeting?
Well, a project like this has the opportunity to create revenue that could offset a lot of these kinds of things. From what we're hearing, it's just.
That's a good point.
Walk down to the docks, you will see the newly installed kiosk is down there. Peak Electric's been down there. And space is kind of constrained, so it's more of an L shaped rather than side by side. And we're working on a small covered areas that'll allow a little shelter and protection from the equipment itself, allow people to get out of the weather when they're doing it. Then also put the signage, talk about what's allowed and not allowed and register here. So it's very simple. Unfortunately, it's going to be a 2-transaction.
If you want power.
If you want power, one for the overnight stay, or just the use fee, and then the other for if you want electricity.
That makes sense. Because not everyone wants power, so.
And the motivation for this effort is to regulate voters and their overstays. And the fee is really less important in my mind it's of such an amount that it disincentivizes people from staying.
Having the documentation that we need and.
Yeah, we have the information to enforce it, but it's charging a fee that's discouraging people to overstay. And
Right.
so it's price ourselves out of the people that would want to come and have a nice time visit.
They get the TV camera gonna go in?
We are working on the camera system. Topaz was down there for a meeting about that.
Back in the foxhole, not bad.
So we've got a call to action from both the federal Senate and the House side as far as its congressionally directed spending. New word for earmarks.
Yes.
Requests. So and there's some buckets of programs that you have to meet qualifications for. And with one of the ones we're looking at, ones for the Milton Creek Bridge, the transportation nexus, the one that gets hit all the time. It just got hit again last week.
Oh, was it?
What's that last week?
Yeah, it just got hit. And the other is we're looking for this, you can't request specific funding for public safety facilities or fire stations, but we're requesting technology upgrades that will give our public safety officials the technology tools that they can afford. So a lot of these crimes are now taking about 60 to 90 days to investigate, take things and send it over. So we're making a $350,000 request that would help that out.
Nice.
Learned that Armstrong is accepting an offer from the people that came to Davidson.
I was gonna ask if you were gonna bring that up.
Yeah, that'd be nice if they, that's anything but done. They'll take some while to put all that together, incentives and things.
Yeah,
That a local group?
that's the group that came in.
The pellet grills and manufacturers, and they have operations up in, they have four centers around the country.
Yep.
One of them is headquartered in Tacoma.
Cole said we did a good job of welcoming them apparently because they like us.
Well, there was four parties looking at Armstrong and they prevailed. That says something.
Interesting.
They make grillers.
40 to 60 jobs too, so I mean,
That's great.
Good.
So we've been meeting internally with the Columbia River Fire and Rescue to identify, to talk about the property up on the bluff there, but to really get at the issue of what their needs are. And they are looking to locate a fire station on the other side of the highway. And what that does for the district and benefits the community is it upgrades our ISO rating, which is your insurance response time rating.
Mhm.
So they're looking at properties that are central, not too far north, not too south, not too far, but on the other side of the highway. At the railroad is a real barrier that creates
In St. Helens, so.
in St. Helens.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And they would still keep the existing house.
they still keep the.
They would have two.
Keep the one out of there.
Yeah, and that would,
Interesting, okay.
so there's some we have a very vested interest in that, making that happen. So we're been talking with them and meeting regularly with chief and staff over there.
More to come?
More to come on that. So, library screening interviews we did on March 28th. Council Topaz part of that process. A list of 11, 3 of them didn't show. So we took 7 down to.
We got 2 instantly.
Yeah, got 2 that are really strong candidates. There were others that were kind of equally in the next kind of tier up down from there that would all be requiring travel from across the country. So we talked about just bringing ones from Oregon, ones from the East Coast. We're bringing those 2 top candidates back on the 18th. And hopefully one of them fits. And we'll have to go out for round 3.
Yeah, this group was better as an overall group than the first group.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, and again, I guess in closing, the city budget, we're still top of mind. We saw a bit of what's to come as far as challenges with the city here. Meeting our infrastructure needs and the challenges, of public safety and funding that and
Were we gonna put the firework stuff that was added onto the evening agenda?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
I
already.
just seen that it was added, so I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, because we have an executive session we need to go to, and we're gonna be back for urban renewal at 6, so I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn, but I will remind people that we'll be going into executive session after this meeting, under ORS 1926602E, real property, and H, consulting with counsel, potential litigation. We are adjourned.
What was the name of the new